Chapter 16 is about appraisals. In this chapter, we're going to describe the differences among various types of value, the theory of valuation, and that an appraiser needs to consider, but we should as well as real estate licensees. Uh, we're going to explain the three approaches to value and discuss the profession of appraising in New Jersey. So, the real estate market. What is a market? Forget about real estate for a second. Just what is a market? What is a marketplace? It's a place where goods can be bought and sold. A price can be established, and it becomes advantageous for buyers and sellers as a place where they can all come together to trade, buy, or sell their goods. Right now, real estate, when you think about it, is an imperfect market because you can't bring the goods to the people. You have to bring the consumer out to where the goods are, where the house is, the real estate. So, because of that, there's some lag time in knowing if there's a shortage or an excess of that real estate and to be able to then respond to it, for the market to be able to respond to it. So, real estate's an imperfect market in that way, although our economy is so tightly intertwined with real estate. It's usually a leading indicator of where the economy is going, provided that there's no other things that are affecting that, like over regulations from politicians creating new regulations, or wars breaking out in some third world country, or something happening that could affect the real estate markets and the pricings of goods or services. Like right now, part of real estate, there's real estate is when it's being built, it needs a lot of products, the lumber and the wiring, the plumbing, and all the glues and nails and this and that, all the parts to the real estate. Um, and it needs to then be shipped out from the factories to the stores, right? And so there's a cost involved with that. And if the cost of fuel is up like it is right now, well, then the cost goes up even more, because it needs to be factored into the overall price of things. So, animations. So, in order for land to have value, it's commonly agreed that it possesses five attributes. One is that it's finite in its supply, meaning that it's limited in its availability. There's no new land that's being created. Whatever's there is there. It's physically immobile. You can't pick it up and put it in a better area. It's durable. Land will last forever. You could drop a bomb on it, still there. Unless it's nuclear, then you can't use it for quite a while because of the contamination and all. All right, but that's extreme. This is why, like the tax man says that you can't depreciate the value of land because technically land does not depreciate. It's except in extreme circumstances like with contamination and such, because it's durable. It lasts forever. So land values typically don't ever go down. Um, what fluctuates is the value of the real estate, the improvements to the land. Land prices usually just keep going up. And four, it's unique in its location and characteristics, like location and views. And five, that it's useful to people. Okay, so these five attributes are what make up the fact that land has value. Supply and demand has an effect too, right? Supply is the amount of goods offered for sale in a market at any given time during any given period. Demand is the number of people willing and able to accept the availability of the goods at any given price during any given time. And when supply increases, prices will drop. When demand increases, prices will rise. This is the theory of supply and demand. This principle states that the value of a property increases if the supply of such properties decrease and the demand for it either increases or remains constant. And the reverse is also true. That's what vice versa means. The reverse is also true. So, what is value? Value is the monetary worth of goods, products, or services offered in the marketplace at any given time. And value means 100%, because anytime you're trying to figure out the value of something, you're trying to figure out all of it, right? And it can be described as the present worth of future benefits. I never heard anybody describe it like that, but this book and maybe an exam question. Hint, hint. Value does not remain the same over time. It varies as the market changes. So here's a tip for you about taking this class from Ottawa, that group of appraisers here in New Jersey. Um, they're consultants, they're appraiser consultants. They put reports together for all kinds of industries, uh, and they put together classes for us called the CMA workshop. Teaches us how to value properties, and who better to be trained how to do that than a group of appraisers, right? And they also have classes if they're not giving the CMA workshop at any given time. Check out their seasonal workshops. They give you a forecast of what the current market conditions are and what changes are expected in the near future and how that's going to affect us so that we can adjust our business appropriately for that and benefit from it. And they do touch, even in the seasonal workshops, they touch on the CMAs a little bit.
So, real estate agents can also be appraiser, or it's
Sure,
completely different?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you could go, but that's a different license.
Yeah.
Uh, we'll
So, are
go
you
over.
a appraiser too? Just to
No, no,
No,
no,
you're
no.
not. But
Um,
you know about CMAs and BPOs. You
yeah,
know how to.
I know how to value properties. Yes, absolutely. But appraisers, they go through a lot more. Look, you're taking a 75-hour class to learn about many different topics to get your real estate license. To get your appraiser's license, uh, it is a how long is that class? A
Maybe
hundred.
too detailed.
Yeah, it's like a it's like 100 hour, 90 or 100 hour. I forget.
Okay.
Well, we'll see it when the slide comes up. But
Hmm.
uh, it's like a 90 or 100 hour course, which you also need to take and pass an exam, and then you just become an apprentice trainee who has to work under a licensed appraiser for a period of time before you can actually get your own appraiser's license.
Okay. So
And then
they have different kind of firms like
there's
brokerage, or they work under any
oh no,
construction company, or I don't know.
no, it's about working under another licensee rather than a company. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than real estate, where you have to be not just working under a real estate broker, but at their company, because their company needs to be registered too to be in
Hmm.
business.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a little bit different. Um, we'll have a slide here that'll explain all about it in two places in this chapter. So okay, so here are real estate views during tax time, right? The owner looks at their house like this, the buyer looks at it like this, the real estate agent, oh, not quite like that. And the tax man looks at it like this, right? Now, when it comes time to sell the property, the real estate agent looks at it like this, the buyer a little bit not so nice, the appraiser like that, and the homeowner thinks they got this when they're selling. You see how that switches? Tax man looks at it like that, and the owner's like, "Oh, my house isn't like that. It's not that big and grandiose." But when it comes time to sell it, all of a sudden it is, and they want a fortune for it, right? See how that flips? So value, here's where we highlight, is is value is the perceived worth of the future benefits arising from the ownership of real property. In other words, it's the present worth of future benefits arising from the ownership of real property. And value does not remain constant, it changes over time. Real estate markets are cyclical. Values go up, they go down. All right. Um, Sorry, just making notes for myself, create some more images for these slideshows depicting things. Okay, here, situs. Here's a term we need to know. We'll see it on exams, definitely for sure. Situs. I pronounce it situs. Easier way for me to remember it because when you find that perfect location where you want to build your house, it's close to the water, got maybe a nice view, um, and you find that perfect location, maybe elevated a little bit, saving you from floods or from predators or the enemies coming from a distance, at least back when a nation's being formed, right? When you're hunting out land and finding that perfect location where you want to build your house and settle your family, you say, we're going to sit us right here. Okay. So that's why I pronounce situs
Latin term?
situs. Yeah, it is. It's a Latin term. Situs is a people's preference for location. And what are the three major factors when determining a location or when affecting value? Location, location, and what was that last one? Oh, yeah, location. Right? Location plays a big factor in your value, right? You want it in a good area. You may want it because you have beautiful views or could be in a safe place or what have you. Now, I got this image from the McKinley family picture album on Wikipedia, some of the story from and some of the pictures you're about to see from a site called Duxter with a little history. Um, so either way, here on page 307, we can highlight situs, the people's preference for a particular location. And I put together a little video and had some AI do some narration for me when explaining it. Let's watch this little video about learning about situs.
The Homestead Act became law in 1862 when it was signed by President Abraham Lincoln. U.S.
Here, let me expand this.
Mississippi River and east of the Rocky Mountains. They could keep it if they lived on the land for 5 years and made improvements to the land. Around 50,000 people lined up to claim around 2 million acres of prime land. At high noon, they were allowed to enter the area and claim the land. This is an actual photo from that day courtesy of the McKinley family picture album. Homesteading was a great opportunity for many people, especially immigrants just moving to the United States. Anyone who was over 21 years old could own land. This included former slaves, immigrants, and single women. Some people snuck onto the land early and hid in order to lay claim to the best areas of land first. These people were nicknamed Sooners. Today, the mascot for the University of Oklahoma is the Sooner. Around 10,000 homesteaders settled around the area that is today.
Can you imagine that? Naming your mascot for your college after a bunch of cheaters? The Sooners, basically cheaters.
Oklahoma City. The next day, April 23, 1889, the city was established with a population of over 10,000 people. It would later become the capital of the state of Oklahoma. Interesting facts about the Homestead Act and the land rush. Northerners wanted the land to be developed by small farmers rather than the large plantation owners from the South. They were afraid the plantation owners would use slaves to farm the land. There was an $18 fee to file the application to get a plot of land. Later Homestead Acts allowed for 320 acres in areas for dry land farming and 640 acres for ranching. By 1934, 270 million acres of land had been given away by the United States government. Homesteading ended in 1976, except in Alaska where it ended in 1986. In the book Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls' dad claims a homestead in Kansas. The following is a reenactment of the Oklahoma land rush that happened on April 22, 1889. The movie is called Far and Away, featuring Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise. Thanks for watching.
All right, so that's a little video I put together there, uh, explaining, the Oklahoma land rush and showing you a little reenactment from that movie called Far and Away. It's actually a nice story. It's a love story. It's actually, I think, the movie where Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman met, where they eventually got married after that. And then they filmed several movies with each other. But if you've never heard of it, check it out. It was actually a decent movie. They were a couple of Irish immigrants, I think. That's where they were coming from different classes entirely. So it was an interesting story, and it shows, as you see in that video clip, where they got that historic actual photo that I showed you from that land rush. It was actually a race. People paid, signed up at the starting line. They did the firing gun, and people ran off and claimed the land. But some people already snuck onto the land they wanted to claim, and they were already there to grab the flags that were already placed out there. So they were called the Sooners. They were the cheaters, which then became their mascot.
Citizens could get.
All right, so there are 4 economic characteristics to value: demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. Dust. Demand is the need or desire by someone who can afford it and is willing to buy the land. Utility means serving a human need or desire. Scarcity means limited in its supply. And transferability is ownership should be easily transferable. So, what kind of question could you get on exam for this? Okay, here, listen up. Which one of these 4 economic characteristics to value would apply to this situation? A developer just builds 500 homes in an area, and you want to get a piece of property that you could put up a combination convenience store and laundromat. Which one of these 4 economic characteristics to value would apply to your situation?
Utility.
Yeah, you got 500 homes in the area. Those people are going to need a store to buy some some essential items and a laundromat, right? Not everybody's going to have a washer dryer, perhaps. So yeah, you're going to have to serve that human need or desire. Very good. See, that's what you need. You don't necessarily need to memorize the four economic characteristics of value, but you do need to understand them and how to apply them. Okay? All right. So, what is an appraisal? It's an unbiased estimate or opinion of value, but that opinion is based on supportable evidence using approved methods by someone who's licensed, called an appraiser. So, an appraiser uh, requires licensing to become an appraiser. They're an independent person. They don't work for the lender and they don't work for the buyer. The fee is paid by the borrower, but the lender selects them from a list of licensed appraisers. They're trained to provide an unbiased estimate or opinion of value based on supportable evidence, methods, and theories. Okay. So that market value is,
So majorly they work with lenders only. I mean, they are the only one who approach them to appraise the
no,
property.
not necessarily. We're going to go over a list of different reasons why people often get appraisals. Okay. Slow your roll. We're getting to it. It's coming. Okay. But yeah, there could be many reasons. It's not just lenders. Lenders are probably giving the most business, yes, but it's uh, appraisals are used for a lot of reasons. You know, we'll go over them. Let's first go over the different types of appraiser licenses. Okay, so in order to become an appraiser, you could start the process by taking a 90-hour appraisal class and passing an exam, all on valuation, valuation theory, things that affect value, uh, the math of it, etc. And then you just become an apprentice trainee. You're not an appraiser. You're an appraiser apprentice trainee after you take and pass that, take 90 hours of class and pass that exam. You have to work under licensed appraisers. Now, to become a licensed residential appraiser, you have to take another 150 hours of classroom time and have about 2,000 hours of experience in no fewer than 12 months. So 1 year of working as an apprentice trainee. After working as an apprentice trainee for 150, I'm sorry, for 2,000 hours, you could go back and get another 150 hours of class and become a licensed residential appraiser. However, licensed residential appraisers can only appraise residential properties up to $1 million in value. If you want to appraise over $1 million in value and be able to work on your own, you could become a certified residential appraiser. Now, for that, you need to have an associate's degree or higher. A degree in what? I don't know, gender study, could be anything. They don't specify. This is one of those arbitrary things that politicians put into place, especially after real estate market crashes, um, because they started pointing the finger at everybody except themselves for being the reason that these markets crashed. And we know that politicians were the number one leading cause of why our markets took off in value and then they eventually crashed. Right? Remember the Barney Frank with the oversight committee of banking was telling the lenders, you're being racist if you're not giving more loans to poor people and minorities. So we're going to start fining you or even yank your license if you don't do that. So banks lowered their lending standards for the poor people, they so that they could get loans. Then they started advertising the hell out of and targeting minorities so that they could get them into more housing too. Okay, so uh, it wasn't the appraiser's fault. Appraisers were valuing properties based on supportable evidence that can be proven still today. So it wasn't their fault. They were following the rules. the the politicians weren't, but yet they get to blame everybody else. Typical. So applicants need a associate's degree or higher. Um, Now, if you don't have a degree, you could substitute 21 semester credits in English, economics, math, business, or law courses. The students could also complete an additional 200 hours in approved appraisal courses and must have 2,500 hours of experience in at least 2 years of working as an apprentice and licensed appraiser.
Not
Certif-
important for the exams, right? The
no, but
numbers, all these numbers.
I'll show you what's important when we finish going through all these. I'll ask you a couple questions and you'll see.
Okay.
Okay, you decide how important it is. Okay, I'll show you. So certified residential appraisers have no limitation on the value of the residential properties that they can appraise. Residential properties are 1 to 4 families or zoned land for residential use. Okay. So far, where are we at here? You became an apprentice trainee after taking 90 hours and passing an exam. You worked as an apprentice trainee, basically a glorified gopher for other appraisers, licensed appraiser types, um, for at least a year, and have 2,000 hours of experience doing appraisals in that period of time. Then you could go back to school, take another 150 hours of class, and take another exam, become licensed residential appraiser. But you could only value residential properties up to $1 million. But then you could go back to school and become a certified residential appraiser. You got to have an associate's degree or higher, or substitute some of those classes. And you have to complete another 200 hours in appraisal courses and have 2,500 hours of experience in at least 2 years of working. And certified residential appraisers can then appraise residential properties at any value. Now, certified residential appraisers, or licensed residential appraisers for that matter, they could also appraise commercial properties, but only when working under the supervision of a certified general appraiser. Remember, I said anytime you hear the word general, it covers a wider scope. Well, a certified general appraiser is the highest type of appraiser license. You could appraise any type of property, residential, commercial, and there's no value limitations. So in order to become certified general appraiser, it's the highest type of appraiser license. The student must have a bachelor's degree or higher. An applicant without a degree can substitute 30 semester hours in courses previously mentioned and 2 elective courses in accounting, geography, AG economics, business management, or real estate. In addition to 300 hours of approved appraisal courses are required, and an apprenticeship of at least 3,000 hours of experience in at least 2.5 years or more, with at least half of that, 1,500 hours, should be on appraising non-residential properties. Now, unlike residential appraisers, certified general appraisers have no monetary caps on the types of properties that they could value. There's no limitations on the types of properties either that they could appraise. In every case, doesn't matter which appraiser license type that you have, you must complete a 15-hour national USPAP course. USPAP stands for Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. The real estate appraiser license law requires individuals that wish to be licensed or certified as appraisers must also undergo criminal background checks. Need a criminal background check for that, but you don't need a criminal background check. You can't do criminal background checks on renters. Real estate agents become members of NAR. Appraisers become members of MAI, the members of the Appraisal Institute. That's what MAI is. NAR members must take the Code of Ethics training class every 3 years. Members of MAI must take a 15-hour USPAP course every 2 years. So for a better understanding, what NAR is to us as real estate licensees, MAI is to appraisers. And what the Code of Ethics class is to us, USPAP is to appraisers. Does that give you a better understanding of what MAI and USPAP is? You know, because we have to take those uh, Code of Ethics training classes. We become members of the Realtor Association. So what the Realtor Association is to us, MAI is to appraisers, and what the Code of Ethics is to us, USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, is to appraisers, and they need to take that class every 2 years.
These notes in the box is just for our
Uh-huh.
reference.
Yeah, yeah, I put them here for your own knowledge there. And let me see. NAR must take Code of Ethics training every 3 years. Members of MAI. Okay, MAI must take 15-hour USPAP. Okay, it's not that members of MAI licensed appraisers must take 15-hour USPAP course. Technically, that's not right, but it's technicality. All right, so I put together this slide here, which gives you just a skinny, but it doesn't give you the. I didn't have enough room in here to spell out what kinds of appraiser classes you could take as alternatives to having the degree. But here's a basic rundown. MAI, because you will on state exam see MAI or USPAP, either or both of them. So as long as you understand that it has something to do with appraisers, you'll be able to figure it out and get it right. MAI are appraisers that are members of the Appraisal Institute. USPAP is that uniform standard of professional appraisal class that they need to take every 2 years. It's a 15-hour national course. Now, you start off as an apprentice trainee, taking a 90-hour class, passing an exam. Then you could graduate to a licensed residential appraiser after taking another 150-hour class and having 2,000 hours of experience as an apprentice trainee in at least a year's time. And you could only appraise residential properties up to $1 million. Certified residential appraiser can only appraise residential properties with no monetary caps on value. They could appraise commercial property, but only under the supervision of a certified general appraiser. They'd need to take 200 hours of additional class and have 25 hours of experience over a period of 2 years and have an associate's degree or higher, or take some of those substituted courses. To become a certified general appraiser, they can appraise any property with no monetary caps on value of those properties. They must have a bachelor's degree or higher and substitute 30 semester credits in certain topics if they don't have a degree, in addition to an additional 300 hours of approved courses. Have 3,000 hours of experience, with at least half of that time in appraising commercial properties and not just residential, over that period of 2.5 years. So here's also an additional bit of information. Any appraiser that does FHA loans, that does appraisals for FHA loans, has to get a special designation. They have to take a special designation class to be able to do appraisals for FHA type loans and get certified to do FHA appraisals, which also require that they check if there's lead paint that's cracking or peeling. If there's a dishwasher, they got to run it through its cycles, make sure it doesn't leak. There's certain additional things that is beyond the scope of normal appraisal work that you have to do as an appraisal to get an FHA designation on your appraiser license. Okay. And if you want more information about becoming an appraiser, you can go to njconsumeraffairs.gov/REA for real estate appraising. Okay. So let me ask you questions. I told you I'd ask you a couple of questions. Let me see. Did I put them here in the slideshow or no? No, I didn't. I'm going to make a note too. So give me 1 second while I pause the recording. So out of these different types of appraiser licenses that we just learned about, what kind of license is required to do an appraisal?
Um, Sorry, what was the question?
What kind of license is required to do an appraisal?
What kind of license? Appraisal license.
There you go. It's a simple, stupid question. It's like a trick
Mhm.
question because
Okay.
we learned apprentice, residential, certified residential, general appraiser. But yet the question was so broad, it doesn't require any of that knowledge other than the knowledge that an appraiser's license is required to do an appraisal. Okay. So, see, that could be tricky. You see how tricky
Mm,
that could be?
mm.
All right. Now, let me show you another way that you could be asked questions on exam. Um, what type of license is required to appraise a property that has 51% storefronts on the bottom and residential upstairs? 49% of the property is residential.
You mean commercial and residential both?
Uh-huh. Mixed use.
Certification of appraisal license.
Mm,
Certified appraisal.
which one?
Certified.
There's two certified appraiser licenses.
Certified residential appraiser.
General,
General appraiser. He can do
because
everything.
it's
Yes.
51 plus it's 51%. It's majority commercial. Okay.
Okay.
Remember, to appraise commercial properties, you have to be a certified general appraiser or working under the supervision of a certified general appraiser. Okay.
Supervision. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. How about this one? What kind of appraiser's license is required to appraise a house valued at $1.2 million?
Licensed residential appraiser.
Nope. They could only appraise up to 1 million. 1.2 million, you need to be a certified
Mm-hmm. Okay.
residential appraiser or a
Up to
certified
one.
general appraiser.
Okay,
You need to,
1.2 million. Hmm.
yeah, 1.2 million. Okay. So that's the way that they may ask you questions on exams as far as these licenses. Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
All right. What is market value? Well, market value, well, let's do it after lunch. It's lunchtime now, so we can break for lunch. All right. So, what is market value? There's many types of value. Market value is an estimate of what the property will sell for, what it's currently worth. So, market value is the price that a ready, willing, and able buyer who's not forced to buy will pay a seller who's not forced to sell. Now, it's based on supportable evidence. It's the most probable price the property will bring. Payment has to be made in cash or its equivalent, like a mortgage loan. It has to have had reasonable length of exposure to the open market. Both the buyer and seller are acting without undue pressure because they need to sell or need to buy. Um, and both parties must be well informed of the property's assets, its defects, as well as its potential. So, the valuation is an estimate by real estate licensees, but appraisers also give estimates based on market value too. Now, market value assumes,
To the lenders.
I'm sorry,
Appraiser give a value to the lenders. Market value to
whoever
the
they're
lenders.
whoever they're appraising for. Okay,
But
whether it's
lenders provide appraisers to the for the buyer, and buyer pays for the
okay,
appraiser, right?
we're just talking about establishing a value on a property right now. It has nothing to do with the lenders. Okay. Um, how do we determine a value of a property? We as real
Okay.
estate agents, we do CMAs,
Yeah.
comparative market analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Appraisers do appraisals. Now, we're not talking about why they're doing an appraisal. They could be doing an
Mm-hmm.
appraisal because you're getting divorced and we need to have an equitable distribution of the assets. But so we need to know how
Situations.
much. So we need to know how much it's worth.
Okay.
It's not just for lenders. There's
Okay.
many situations where appraisers do appraisals. Okay. So right now, all we're talking about now is the valuation and what market value is and how it's established. Okay. So market value would assume that the transaction is an arm's length transaction. Arm's length transaction, if there's an arm's length between us, what is that kind of indicating? That we're not too close, right? So that term, arm's length transaction, means it's a transaction between people who are not that close to each other. Okay. Um, because you cannot use a transaction as a comparable. When you're comparing two properties to determine the value, you can't use as a comparable property one where um, a brother sold his property to his sister, because that's not an arm's length transaction. They're close to each other. So, what do you think the odds are that the brother gave the sister a break on the price of the house that he sold her? You know what I'm saying? It's not. It's not a true indication of market value that can be used as for comparison to establish the value of someone else's property now. And that's what appraisers and real estate agents do. When we determine market value, we base it on supportable evidence. That supportable evidence is recent sales of similar homes, similar in size, style, age, location, amenity, condition. Okay, so these factors we use to compare. Okay, now that we got the house down, we're trying to evaluate it based on the how much it sold for, and then that would be the perfect uh, example to compare it to another property that's the same, and that's how much it should sell for. But if that property that we're comparing it to was sold by individuals and it was not an arm's length transaction because they were close, there was an other factor we didn't take into consideration, which is the relationship, which had an effect on that sale price. So it's not a true indication of the market's value. You follow? So it's important to understand what an arm's length transaction is, that term, and why appraisers and real estate agents cannot use sales that are not arm's length as in their comparisons when determining value, because uh, it's not a true reflection of the true value, where you have a seller and a buyer both trying to do the best for themselves. Sellers trying to get the most they can, the buyers trying to get it for as cheap as they can. And wherever they end up, that's the market value, or that's actually the market price. In a true um, in a perfect world, market value and market price would be one and the same. Market price is the price, it's a sale price, it's what it eventually sells for. The market value is an estimate of what it's going to sell for based on the comparables of recently sold properties. You follow? You with me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So the example of what is not considered arm's length transaction, I gave a couple examples on this slide. A brother sells a home to his sister. This cannot be used as the comparable because it's not a true reflection of that value. Um, the relationship of the parties is an outside factor or force that affects the value. The brother's probably going to give his sister a break on the price, so it's not an accurate reflection, and therefore it cannot be used as a comparison, a comparable, when comparing two properties to try to estimate the market value. Okay. We can look at two properties. They're the same architectural style. Then we can make adjustments for the differences in them. And but what's the adjustments based on? Well, how much did it recently sell for? And then we make adjustments for all the differences in the property. And then that would give us a better reflection of the value. But if we didn't take into consideration whether it was an arm's length transaction or not, our valuation is going to be totally off. Okay. So here's where we do the highlights for this stuff on page 307. Even though you already got your stuff highlighted, I'm going to keep it on screen just for a moment so somebody could pause it if they needed to so that they could highlight this. Okay. Talks about what an appraisal is. It's an estimate of market value. Market value is defined as a price that a ready, willing, and able buyer who's not forced to buy and a seller who's not forced to sell have come to an agreement on. It's not an it should be an arm's length transaction. Now, market price is what the property actually sells for. It's the selling price. And in a perfect world, market value and market price are one and the same. Market value is an estimate of what it's going to sell for based on supportable evidence and research and making adjustments for the differences in the property, if it's an arm's length transaction. Market price is what it actually ends up selling for. So if we do a good job in determining market value, that's what the house should sell for. But people also do negotiations and such. So there's other factors that could play a role into what the property actually sells for. Now, we heard of cost, price, value. We heard these terms before. But cost relates to the past, price relates to the present, and value relates to the future. When we estimate market value, we're estimating how much it's going to sell for based on recently sold properties. Okay. The price is what it actually sells for. It's the current value. And the cost relates to the past. How much did it cost you to buy the house? How much did it cost you to build the house? How much did it cost you to do improvements? Do buyers care how much it costs you, or they care more about what it's currently worth? They care about what it's currently worth. So cost has very little to do with value, because buyers, they don't care how much it cost you to install that swimming pool. They care about how much it's worth now. Some improvements, you don't get all of your money back, like a pool. So cost has little to do with the actual value of the property. Market value is that estimate based on analysis of comparable sales. Comparables are homes that are similar, that we could compare it to, that have recently sold. Then we make adjustments for the differences. The differences, once again, in size, style, age, amenity, condition, to calculate the projected sale price, which is going to be the current value. The market price, that's the selling price. That's what the property actually sells for. And cost is the total fee to construct the property or make improvements. It has little to do with the current value. Cost relates to the past value. Buyers don't care what improvements cost. They care about what it's worth now. Not all improvements will pay for themselves. So therefore, cost does not equal market value. It has little to do with it. I got listings from builders, new construction. I remember it was one builder I dealt with. His first house put him out of business. He built the wrong type of property in the wrong area, and it was asking too much for it. And the cost of what it cost him to build and construct that building had nothing to do with what somebody was willing to pay for it. It ended up ruining him. It put him out of business because he built a mansion in a middle-class neighborhood, and people who could afford the mansion are not going to want to be in that neighborhood. They're going to want to be in the mansion neighborhood. So, but he was like, yeah, but it's right on the lake. Yeah, but all the mansions are down the street, even though they're not on the lake. You know, you put it in a different neighborhood. Nobody's going to pay that much money to have the best house on the block. Okay. Usually you're going to end up losing value. This has something to do with a theory that we call conformity. Buildings should be conforming to the neighborhood and what's surrounding them. If you have the best house on the block, odds are you'll never get all your money back. You won't. People will pay more than what they would for those other houses, but you're never going to get all your money back because it cost you to build that best house on the block. Highest and best use is the most profitable current use that a property can be used for, or a use that will be most in demand in the reasonably near future. That's what a highest and best use is. So let me give you an example. What is a highest and best use? Uh, a lot used for a parking lot where you rent out parking spaces, or to build a parking garage where you could have maybe indoor parking and have more levels to have more vehicles.
Yeah, indoor parking.
The indoor parking, right? What about a parking garage versus a office building? It doesn't matter,
Office building.
even if it's in New York City where there's parking is expensive, the rents for those buildings are going to be even more. So the highest and best use would be the office space. You know, it's the most profitable use that a property can be used for or adapted to, or the most profitable use that will be in demand in the reasonably near future. So that's the theory. It's just a theory. We're just examining theories that appraisers and real estate agents use when valuing properties. Now, an amenity is a tangible or it could be an intangible benefit to the property in some way, like clean air, nice views. You don't want to open your window and see a brick wall. If you open your window and you see like a beautiful city view or lake view, or you see a waterfront, or the mountains or something, a nice view, people will pay more for a better view. Or convenience features like pools, jacuzzis, heated floors, heated toilet seats, a bidet, high-end appliances or custom features. They may pay more for that. Or it may attract them. It's more desirable. So amenities can add value, and they could make a property more attractive to people. But not all amenities will pay back 100% of what it costs to install them, like the example of a pool. Pools will never pay back what it costs to install them. But yet they're more attractive to people. People are willing to pay more for a house that has them. Substitution, the theory of substitution is set by the cost of purchasing a similar substitute property. So basically, this theory goes like this. If you have two homes that are exactly the same in size, style, location, amenity, everything's exactly the same about them. The less expensive one will sell first. Okay. And the substitution, the cost of purchasing a similar substitute property could drive up the costs. I'll show you on the next slide. No one will pay more if the same can be had for less. Well, maybe not on this slide, but on a slide after this one. This is just a slide where you would do the highlights and you would write what cost is, what price is, and what value is. Cost relates to the past, price relates to the present, and value relates to the future. Okay, and we got the highlights here. All right, so here is a slide that demonstrates the theory of substitution. If we have three homes exactly the same, one's for 300, one's for 305, one's for 310, which one would you buy?
First,
Why is that?
because it's lesser in cost.
It's cheaper. Go ahead, say it. It's cheaper, lesser in cost.
It's
Okay,
cheap.
it's cheaper, right?
It's cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all exactly the same. It's the cheaper. Why spend more when the same can be had for less, right? But somebody else was thinking just like you, and they beat you to it. Now, which one would you buy? Two, right? Why? Because it's cheaper. However, the cost just went up because somebody purchased the other one. So that's the theory of substitution, that the cost of a property is set because somebody else purchased one. So somebody else purchased this one, driving up your costs. So now you're paying more for a property because of somebody else's purchase. Okay, so now you want to buy two. Somebody else beat you to that too. Now, this is a good segue to supply and demand, right? Because if you miss out on two, now there's only one house left and the demand is definitely there. This house is probably going to sell for more than 310, right? Unless there's only one buyer left in the neighborhood looking. This is the theory of how the theory of substitution then leads to supply and demand. All right. So we have supply and demand. That's the value of a property increases if the supply decreases and the demand either increases or remains constant, and vice versa. The opposite can be true. Conformity. This theory tends to stabilize values better if the homes in the neighborhood conform to each other. You don't want to have the mansion in the middle of a poor neighborhood. You'll never get your money back. This is why in condominium complexes, they don't want somebody painting their front door bright orange and standing out and being an eyesore compared to the other properties. They want them all to look uniform, even if they may have alternating patterns of the looks of the front of those townhouses in the condo community, perhaps. Um, it's uniform and it remains constant because uniformity, conformity tends to have stabler prices. Um, Neighborhoods that have uh, single family houses, you have all the same style house in the neighborhood. This is a very common thing. And the properties maintain their value better in those neighborhoods. Whereas if you have one that has single family houses, then you have an apartment building, then a storefront, then you have a two-family house, then some single families of different styles and sizes. Those properties do not maintain their value as well because they don't conform to the neighborhood. Conformity has a stable value, has a better chance of having a stabilized value anyway. Non-conforming structures don't maintain as well in the values in the neighborhood. Having the best house on the block, you don't get your money back. You won't. Okay, the theory of regression and progression. Regression is, let's say your house is beautifully maintained. You keep up on it, it's gorgeous. But all the other homes in the neighborhood around you, people are getting foreclosed on. The houses are getting boarded up. Spray paint on the houses. Get some gangs moving in there. Yeah, but your house is beautiful and your lawn is meticulous and your house is still as beautiful as the day you bought it. Doesn't matter. Regression is dragging down your value because the neighborhood's regressing. Just like progression, where all the houses maybe are getting bought up and maybe torn down and built up with McMansions. Everybody's doing that in the neighborhood, but you haven't yet. Your house is older, maybe falling apart even. Um, your house's value is still going up. It's being brought up by what's around you. The neighborhood is elevating the value of your home because that area is now more desirable. That's the theory of progression. Okay. So another way to look at it is with regression and progression. um, all ships rise with the tide and all ships fall with the tide, you know? So the if the neighborhood's going up, it's going to bring you up too, even if your house is the ugliest piece of crap in the neighborhood. And if values drop, so will yours, even though you have the most beautiful house in the neighborhood. So that's the theory of regression and progression. Let me back up for a second. Anticipation. I'll give you a good example of anticipation. Did you hear what they're building down the street over here from me? Did you hear what they're putting up over there? That's anticipation. So the theory of anticipation, in anticipation of what could be building there, what are they building? What can happen? Um, that could either raise the values or lower them depending on what it is that they're building there, right? Anticipation is gambling. That's the best way to put it. I've had I've had areas in my town that I live in, Linden. Um, I could give you an example of how anticipation. A lot of people rushed out to buy real estate a couple of years back. Um, they were going to build a NASCAR racetrack in Linden. There's no NASCAR racetracks anywhere in this area. You'd have to go to maybe Pennsylvania. They got the Poconos Raceway, but other than that, if you had a NASCAR racetrack here in the tri-state area, that could really generate a lot of attraction. Anywhere, even if you're not a NASCAR fan, anywhere in the United States where there's a NASCAR racetrack, the towns around it, let alone the town that it has it, um, they see economic booms in the times where they got races going on. People book hotel rooms a year in advance before the race. All the stores and shops get flooded with all the fans that come to town to watch the race. Um, in anticipation of this NASCAR racetrack being built in Linden, um, people started buying up land around where the proposed racetrack was going to be built. A lot of that land is marshland, it's wetlands, flooded areas. They would have to build them up. Um, but in anticipation of that NASCAR racetrack getting built there, people knew the value was going to go up. So they rushed out and they were fighting over each other to get this previously worthless marshland, wanting to buy it up. And they were going to build it. They got the approvals. However, they couldn't get NASCAR to approve one race there. So they scrapped the project. But in anticipation, the values of the properties around there went up as people demanded them and started buying them up in anticipation of the racetrack being built. I even got in on it. I found out through public the public hearings. I found out what they were going to name the racetrack, Liberty Speedway. So I actually bought libertyspeedway.com. I'm the proud owner of libertyspeedway.com. Okay. But so I didn't buy any physical real estate. I just bought some, the electronic, the digital real estate space. So I only spent around $10, whereas people were spending hundreds of thousands on buying land, in anticipation. So I lost $10. Big deal. Other people losing a lot more than that. That's anticipation. So NASCAR racetrack was proposed to be built there, and I have the historic things here about it. Let me see. Do I have any slides about it? Nah, I just got the links here for these speedways. Yeah, I usually show people. Look, here's the Linden Airport. Has a lot of history. through 1949 through 1954, there was actually a NASCAR races were held at the Linden Airport. This is where, so Linden has some actual history. You would think that NASCAR grew up in the South, in the southern states, but actually, in the early 40s or late 40s, early 50s, NASCAR got a big following right here in Linden. There was here's the airport, the runways. You can see how the runways cross over here. And then the taxi roads for the airplanes and such, they use that as the raceway. Yeah, here's the actual thing from 1950 and a list of all the race car drivers, what they were racing, where they were from, the different flags that they used during the race. There's a picture of it, Linden Airport. You see that? And they had a grandstand over here, people watching the race cars. Look at that. 50 cent 50-cent price for the ticket for a 100-mile race. Look at those hot rods. Not quite what you see today on racetracks, but, but that's NASCAR right there. Linden Airport. There's one of the race cars right underneath the plane. Oh, look at this one. General admission, $1, tax included. Well, prices were going up. First time in the East, direct from California, drag races at Linden Airport. 150-foot wide asphalt drag strip. Yeah, at the airport. This is the airport, still there today. Even though our mayor is looking to sell it off to developers to build a data center. And everybody's does not want that. All right.
It's
And we
still
had,
there.
yeah, it's still there
It's
today.
still,
It's still there right now. But the mayor of our town is currently trying to sell it off to developers. And he wants to, for anything, he just wants the money so he could blow away on stuff. Maybe uh, use it for whatever reasons that he shouldn't be using it for. Let's just say that. I don't want to put out any slanderous statements out there. So let's just leave it at that. So, with the proposal of the NASCAR, here's another news story in the racing forums back in 2003. People were talking about this, that there was Liberty Speedway at Linden could include a 100,000 seat grandstand expandable to 140,000 seats with 0.92 mile speedway, according to NASCAR regulations, a 400,000 square foot entertainment center, and a 20-story hotel and conference center. The developer was Morton Salkind, who has included a number of celebrities and politically connected people on the project, including race car driver and actor Paul Newman. Remember him? He's passed away now. You also had race car driver Mario Andretti and Democrat political operative James Carville. Yeah, he's a relic, but he's out there still. You see him in the news every now and then. Anyway, they proposed this NASCAR racetrack, and it was a fantastic idea. Got the approval from Linden City Council members. It was a $401 million project. Got it approved. The closest NASCAR racetrack was Watkins Glen in the Poconos and Dover International Speedway. But the one problem that occurred, they couldn't get NASCAR to sanction one race, and because they didn't have it on their calendar, on their schedule. And they said, well, a NASCAR racetrack without one NASCAR race makes it only a racetrack. And we don't need just a racetrack, we needed a NASCAR racetrack. So they scrapped that project. But in anticipation, people bought up all the properties in the area around it. And now they're stuck with some worthless swampland again. marshland. Okay, so some theoretic principles of value here. Um, oh wait, let me so put another note here. Okay, so here's some theoretic principles of value: increasing and diminishing returns. Let's just say that you have a kitchen. It's in desperate need of remodeling. It is totally unusable right now. So any improvements you do on it will increase the value and you'll get all your money back to a certain point. But let's say you start to now go extreme with your kitchen makeover and you start going even higher than that. Your return starts diminishing. So you'll get all your money back up to a certain point, but now you start going extreme with your makeover, your return on your investment starts to decline or diminish. Okay. That's what increasing and diminishing returns are. Okay. Contribution, how you put money back into the property. If you put money back into the property, number one, can determine if the property values rise. How you put money into the property can also make a difference. You know, are these improvements that are considered dated, or are they more modern improvements that are in demand? Some additions increase value, while others may not. And the absence of any improvements could decrease the value. What about the theory of competition? In this one, we're not looking so much in residential, but more along the lines in commercial properties, right? If you have an area where there's a lot of businesses but there's no place to eat lunch, if they put in a McDonald's, you think that McDonald's will do good business there if it's the only place to eat that's nearby? Yeah. So it'll be very profitable. But the only problem is it's going to start the competition is going to notice this, and they're probably going to put in a Burger King or a Wendy's or something next door, right? So profits attract competition, and there's nothing wrong with that. But excess profits can attract ruinous competition without now they start putting up eateries all over the place. Now they're all fighting during breakfast and lunchtime to get the business. So the theory of competition can also play a role in the value of a property. And change. When we say change, it can mean many things. Change in the local market conditions, in the jobs, in the local politics. Can local politics play a role in the value of your real estate? Just look at New York City for a second. Would that be a
Yeah.
prime place for you to move right now? When you got the mayor saying that he wants to tax the rich, and basically they're taxing them to death. And they want to let criminals back on the street and don't prosecute them because of whatever kind of political nonsense ideas they got running around in their heads to let criminals back on the streets, to justify it in whatever way they do. You know, when people can't feel safe walking on the street, feeling like someone's going to walk up to you and sneak you and punch you in the back of the head or knock you out and then beat the hell out of you, maybe even rob you. But either way, they'll beat the hell out of you just by walking down the street. Like that 70-year-old man or 77-year-old man they got, we see in the news recently that that was on the West Coast, though, where a guy stepped off the bus, was walking down the street, and two younger guys beat the hell out of him. Turns out they just arrested him, found out one of them was an illegal alien. And even though he was claiming to be in politics, local politics, and claiming that he knew the mayor even, and who advocates for letting these people back on the street all the time. But there you go. They're aware who she is now, but they also know there's no consequences. So they beat the hell out of a guy, break his leg, bust some bones, you know, of a 77-year-old man for no apparent reason. Same thing happens in New York City. Actors are getting punched in the head. People are getting just beaten at random, not even robbed. You know, would you feel safe buying a house there and moving there now? Probably not. May want to move across the bridge into New Jersey. It's cheaper. You're close to the city, so you could still go to work, but you could feel more comfortable with your family living in safety, not walking out on the street and getting accosted. Right. So politics, regulations, crime rates, taxes, improvements, contamination, industry, weather, flood zones, the remapping of the flood zones, um, dictating whether you need flood insurance or not, let alone if you flood, um, and the local economy. All these things play a role. Just look at yesterday. I mean, yesterday. Just look over what's been happening over the last couple of years in New York City. You know, with the last couple of candidates as mayors, the last mayors they had, and the new mayor, they're getting worse one after the other. You had Chase said that they're moving out of New York City. uh, they're moving down to Florida to move their headquarters. Same thing they just announced yesterday with another one where their new mayor made a commercial and put it out there, and all I could call it is gaslighting. They said we're going to be taxing the rich, and one example is this guy, and he names the guy by name, and then he's filming this in front of his house. This is where he lives. This is his house in this high-rise building. Would you feel safe being there, especially after recently you had a healthcare CEO that was murdered? Somebody walked up and put a bullet in his head, and they find that acceptable because it's for social reasons. And hey, claims are being denied. Insurance companies eat the rich, hell, kill the rich. Now it's being seen as an acceptable thing in society amongst sickos and these politicians. I don't understand how they're getting on board with all that. But this one, you got this new Mandami in New York as the mayor, calling people out, filming their residences. Well, that CEO that he called out just announced he feels uncomfortable living there anymore. He's going to move his company, and the thousands and thousands of great paying jobs that were there, he's moving to Florida. Out of New York, going down to Florida. So
I missed this news. I need to check this.
Just happened yesterday. Just happened
Wow.
yesterday. And it's incredible how stupid these politicians are. It's like they're immature children. They don't get their way. Let's eat the rich. Let's punish the people who are making the jobs. Let's punish those people. Let's let the criminals and the drug users on the street, let them shoot up their drugs, and, let it be the Wild West. They're going to leave. It's common sense. People have been saying this for the longest time. They will leave. They're not going to stay around. Even the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul or whatever. She's an idiot too. They were, telling her the same thing. These industries are going to move out when you keep attacking them. They're like, let them leave. We don't need them. Now they're moving out at such great numbers. The industry, you got so many of these buildings, they're going vacant. No taxes being collected on them. The businesses are not putting money back into the economy. They're also very philanthropic, remember, and they're chasing their own people out because a lot of these folks are liberals too, just like they are in New York City, and so they subscribe to a lot of these liberal causes. But then when they get personally attacked, their businesses get attacked. When these things start hitting your pocketbook and your family and your safety, they're not going to stick around with you. They're going to leave. They're going to move to Texas. They're going to move to Florida. to these red states that are more accommodating and more believing in your political freedoms and safety, and you should keep more of your money in your pocket type deal. So yeah, it does affect. They move. We could see it just by looking at the news any given day, right? Look at California. What's been happening the last, I don't know, 8, 10 years or whatever, since Gavin Newsom's been the governor of Florida. I'm sorry, California. California has seen a mass exodus for the first time in history ever, ever. There's never been people leaving California. They've always been moving there because it's so beautiful and the weather and everything. But now, when filth is in the street, homelessness is random, you get taxed to death, and even after you die, they take most of your income. I mean, it's why would anybody want to stay there in their right mind? Want to stay there? Yeah. So you leave somewhere else. This is why Florida is now seeing so many people moving there. Even though Florida does have its expenses, like property insurance is very expensive in Florida because of the storms. Sometimes they wipe them out, the flooding and the storms like that. The homeowner's insurance is very expensive. It could be upwards of almost $7,000 a year in homeowner's insurance. But the properties are cheaper. There's no income tax, things of that nature. All right. But these things, changes, do affect value. They need to be taken into consideration as well when determining the values of property. So these are all the theories, the principles, the theory of value, because it does play a role. Like it or not, it does play a role. So we're going to learn now about the 3 approaches to value and then do the math on them. Okay. First, let's just learn what are the 3 approaches to value. We have the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. Boom. Need to know that. Okay. Sales comparison approach, the comparison approach, comparative approach. This is done by doing a CMA. Real estate agents do these for buyers as well as sellers. We also use that approach to value when we do BPOs. We do them for lenders in exchange for a fee when they don't want to pay all the money for an appraisal, like when people are refinancing or to determine if they're going to be dropping the PMI insurance on a loan. And appraisers, they do appraisals. Appraisals, one of the approaches to value is the sales comparison approach. And that's the best approach that's used for single family houses, usually 2-family houses, even multifamily. We're going to learn about the cost approach to value and what it is and when it's used, as well as the income approach, which is basically for any property that generates income. So let's first highlight the sales comparison approach. You already got these highlights too? Okay. So the sales comparison approach, we use that in CMAs. It's most often used by real estate licensees. That sounds like it could be an exam question. Which of the 3 approaches to value is most often used by real estate licensees? Yeah, sales comparison approach. Best for residential property valuation. It compares a subject property to similar comparable properties, which we call comps for short, that are similar in size, style, location, amenity, age, condition, that have recently sold. And we compare it to the subject property that we're trying to determine the value. You should have a minimum of 3 comparable properties when trying to determine the value. And then we're going to make adjustments.
Yeah. Three properties apart from the current house.
Yeah.
For which we are doing appraising.
Yeah. Okay. So we want to determine what the value of your house is, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to look for other homes in your area, closest to you as possible, but
Yeah.
in your area that are the
Yeah.
same architectural style, similar in size, style, location, amenity to your house. We're looking for a minimum of 3 comparable properties that we could compare it to because we're trying to determine the value of your house. So we have no value on your house. We have no idea what your house is worth right now. So we're going to look for 3 homes in your area that are similar to yours and see what they have recently sold for. That's the best way to determine what the value is on your house, right? Make sense? But not all houses are exactly the same. They may have, they may vary in their condition, in the size slightly, the different amenities. Um, so we have to make adjustments for all of those factors, the age, the condition of the house, all of these factors we have to make adjustments for from the sale price of those minimum 3 homes that we know sold. Right off the bat, we get a minimum of 3 houses. We look at them, we could see how much they sold for, and that's the price range your house should sell within. But we can narrow that price range down to a more accurate range, like an appraiser would, by making adjustments for the differences to pretend that if they were exactly like yours, how much would they have sold for then? That's what we're doing to narrow down that price range so we know we get a better idea of how much your home is worth.
So
So, yeah,
in the comparison, do we also look at the age of comparables?
yep, yep. Now, do most real estate agents do that? Probably not. Most real estate agents are they're freaking lazy. Sorry to put it that way, but they're lazy. And a lot of them, they just look up 3 comparable properties that are similar to yours that recently sold, and boom, that's the price range. Or they may just I think your house is closer to that one. So we'll put it more on the higher valuation or the lower valuation. That's the lazy way of doing it. And that's the way that most agents actually do it. But if you want to be a good agent and be able to price properties more accurately, so you would make the adjustments for all of those differences. And taking that class, that CMA workshop from the Ottawa group, that would give you a better education on knowing how to do it. See, a lot of these agents, they were never trained by their brokers how to do it. They just said, hey, look up 3 properties similar and, you know, that's it. That's the price range. Um, but the appraisers, they teach you how they do it so that you could get a more accurate pricing. Listen, if you're really good at pricing, what you could brag about when you go to get listings um, is your list to sale price ratio. Like if you're in a running with other real estate agents about who should get the listing, you say, hey, listen, these other agents, they could promise you whatever price they want, but look at their list to sale price ratio. How much did they, what was the price that they listed it at? And what is the eventual price that it's sold at? If it was much lower, you could see that they have a habit of over promising and under delivering. I'm not doing that. I'm more accurate. I care more about what your home is worth, pricing it accurately, and getting it sold. Plus, when you overprice properties, uh, it generally takes longer to sell them. So, do you got a lot of time? Are you in a hurry to sell? Or would you like to sell as quick as possible, but get the most money you can? I'm your real estate agent. So we make adjustments in the sale prices of the comparable properties. There's no adjustment of price to be made on the subject property. The subject property is your house that we're trying to determine the value for. Okay. The comparable properties are the ones that already sold. We know what they sold for. We're just trying to make adjustments to make them more similar to your subject property. And sometimes we add or subtract from their sale price value depending on how they compare to your house. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. Um, Now, location should be relatively the same. It should definitely be in the same municipality, but it's better if they're in the same neighborhood too, not on the other side of town, because there's more desirable areas in town and lesser desirable areas. We all know this. Now, physical features and conditions should be similar. If not, we're going to make adjustments for them. The terms and conditions of the properties that have been sold. We want to make sure that there was all arm's length transactions. We want to make sure that if one property was offering to pay concessions to pay the buyer's closing costs, that factors into the overall sale price and should not be considered. If there were concessions, we should subtract that concession amount from the sale amount, and that gives you a better reflection of the actual value of that property. If the subject property is missing features or is in poorer condition than the comparable property, you're going to subtract from the value of the comparable property to bring it to the same level. In the book, they say CBS, comparable better subtract, or CPA, comparable poorer, add to the value. Instead, I got a visual. Where's my visual graphics? Hold on. I got some visual tools here to help you determine this. It's very high tech here. Ready? This is the way I'm going to do it. Here's your subject property. That's your house. And here's a comparable property, right? Your house has 4 bedrooms. The comparable property has 3. It's missing a feature subject property has. We determine how much a bedroom is worth, add it to the known sale price of the comparable property, what it already sold for, and then, so now it has 4 bedrooms. That's how much your house should sell for. If that was the only difference, 1 bedroom. We figure out how much that 1 bedroom made a difference in value and add it to the comparable price because it's sold with only having 3 bedrooms. Add that value and it brings it up to what your property should sell for. That's the idea. We're trying to make the comparable to the same level. If the comparable property had 5 bedrooms, we would subtract the value of a bedroom to bring it down to as if it's sold with only 4. Does that make sense? Are you with me so far? Okay. So you would do this also for size, condition, and other features. I'm just trying to make it easy to understand when do you add, when do you subtract from the compare. You never add or subtract from the subject property. Subject property stays here. It never moves. The only thing that moves is the comparables value. We know what it sold for. If it's in worse condition than the subject property, we try to determine how much more it would have sold just based on the condition, add it to its value, and that's what your subject property should sell for. Okay. If it's better condition than the subject property, we got to make an adjustment for that condition and bring it down and subtract. So when do you add or subtract from the comparables value? If it has a feature that the subject property does not, or if it's in better condition or newer than the subject property, determine the value of that difference and subtract it from its sale price value that we know what it sold for, and bring it down to the same level. If it's
So
missing a
when we
feature,
are
you
so,
add. Yeah, no, okay, go ahead.
so when we are comparing a property in the same area, the lot size will be equal. The area of the property will almost
Not
be equal.
necessarily. Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to lot sizes, you as an individual person, you're probably more picky about it than an appraiser is. Okay. Appraisers only consider lot size differences, not if it's, oh, well, my lot is 5 feet wider than the neighbor's property.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't make a difference in the value at
So
all.
I'm just asking if my property area is similar to the comparable property and I have 4 bedrooms and the comparable property has 6, then is that, I mean, those two rooms will add the value of the
Okay, so
property, or because the
okay,
sizes will reduce?
okay. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I didn't get there quite yet. Okay, so your subject property has 6 bedrooms, and the comparable property had, what did you say, 4?
Maybe two
Okay,
or four. I mean, subject has bigger rooms and comparable have smaller rooms.
okay. So,
Mhm.
that's where something comes into play. It's a little bit different. Okay, I have had situations before where I actually got a listing. I got a listing of a house. This house was gorgeous. This lady and her husband redid this house from top to bottom. It was beautiful inside. Everything is luxury and high end and beautiful in a great neighborhood. The neighbor had the same exact house. Okay, so the overall dimensions of the house were exactly the same. Her house was 3 bedrooms. The neighbor's house had 5. Because you split 1 bedroom into 2 will not make it worth more.
No, so that's a different case. I mean, if you have standard bedroom sizes and the comparable has make
Smaller
two
bedroom
rooms, yes,
sizes.
smaller,
Yeah.
then is that a comparable property, or we will compare
No,
with the area
no.
of the
The
plot?
property's comparable, but you don't make adjustments because it has more bedrooms, because it has the same square footage. Appraisers, let me clue you on a tip. Appraisers often mark how many bedrooms a house has, um, but they go based off of square footage.
So that would be more detailed, as you said. That's more detailed. And 90 hours they are studying only about how to appraise a property.
Yeah.
But for CMAs, what should be the right approach? I was just trying to
Well,
understand.
Well, for me, I looked at the neighbor actually ended up putting their house on the market as well. Okay. And I looked at it and I was like, well, they had 5 bedrooms. You can't compare it to this, house. You only have 3. And so she's like, yeah, but their house is old and disgusting on the inside, and they have a smaller bedrooms. They just split a bedroom into 2. They reconfigured it, but it's still the same square footage. It's not a different. And so I set up a preview for myself as a real estate agent. Set up an appointment that I did a walkthrough, and I did a walkthrough of that house. And yeah, that the house was disgusting. It had old, disgusting, nasty carpet in it. The rooms, it wasn't very clean, wasn't very well maintained. They split bedrooms. In the meantime, this lady next door, she's got gleaming floors, hardwood floors, granite countertops, center console, like a luxury kitchen, like a chef's kitchen. The bedrooms are big and beautiful with walk-in closets with benches where you could sit down to change your shoes and socks and all that stuff. It was the bedroom sizes, especially the master bedroom, was phenomenal. It had his and hers closets, walk-in closets, and then a general uh, area there. I don't even know what you would call that for changing room, in the closet. Um, and uh, you know, the houses were same square footage though. Just that other house didn't have all those nice amenities and features because they decided to break it down and turn them into additional bedrooms instead of having walk-in closets and stuff. They had these smaller closets. Uh, so, can I really use that as a comparable? Yeah, I can still use it as a comparable. I just don't count the number of bedrooms. It's same square footage, uh, but I also look at it. It's not in the same condition. They don't have the same features that this house has. So I got to make some adjustments for that. Also, when you look through it, which one would you want to buy? Which one seems more desirable and why? And you got to try to take an objective stance on that. See, this is where some of the theory comes into play, that it's not just looking at number of bedrooms, this one versus that one. There's some theory that has to take into consideration size, style, location, amenity, condition, age, all these give you that little bit of leeway. That's why there's some opinion of value that plays into there as well. Okay. So, but it is supported by that evidence. So we could compare that house to another one, and also look up others in the area, and check them out. This is why we don't just use one house as a comparable. What's going on? This is why we don't just use one house as the comparable, because it may not give us an accurate reflection. Okay. That same exact house next door with 5 bedrooms versus this 3 bedrooms. I'll say, okay, well, what did it sell for? Okay. If it sells whatever it sells for, I'm still going to think that this house should sell for more because it is so much nicer. First of all, just on desirability alone, this house will sell just based on that factor for more. Okay. Nobody's going to pay more for those 2 extra bedrooms, 2 extra small bedrooms in a house, So you got to look at it at the overall, as well. So
Yeah,
it's not
suppose
an,
for them, the closets and everything, that's an amenity.
yeah,
Or if
I mean,
it is a theater, it's an amenity, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, look, it's not an exact science, but it does help guide you most of the way. But there is some theory that must play a role into it as well. Okay. So here is a chart similar to the one that you have in the book. Now, I made this chart up here. You know what? I'm going to make this more of an interactive chart. Let me make a note for myself to make chapter 16 chart interactive. Okay, so in this chart that you're seeing here on the screen, we have a subject property we're trying to determine the value for. Here are its features, and we have 3 comparable properties that have already sold, and here are the selling prices right next to them: comp 1, comp 2, comp 3. If we do what most real estate agents do, we could see that the price range that your house should sell in is within 300,000 to 335 price range, which that's not a overly big price range. Okay, so that's not that bad right off the bat, but we could get more accurate if we make adjustments for the differences. Now, the differences here on this property, let's just say that a bedroom is worth 15,000. This isn't the proper way to do it, but let's just say that a bedroom is worth $15,000. A half a bath is worth 5,000. A garage, each garage space is, or a garage, having a garage or not having a garage is $10,000. And additional garage spaces would make a $6,000 difference. So let's make adjustments just based off of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make adjustments to the comparables to the subject property. Let's look at comp 1 to start. Comp 1 has 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and 1 garage space. It's a Cape Cod style house. So all these comps are. So that's good. We don't need to make an adjustment for the architectural style. Some are worth more than others, if we needed to do that. So here we have 3 bedrooms instead of 4. How much is a bedroom worth? $15,000. So this one only has 3 bedrooms. And what is our objective here? To try to pretend that if this house was exactly like the subject property, what it would have sold for. So if it had 4 bedrooms, and that's the only difference we made, are we going to add the value of a bedroom to this sale price or subtract?
Add.
We're going to add. So to make it 4 bedrooms. So we're going to add plus $15,000. So we're making the adjustments here. Now, this house has 2 baths. The subject property has 2.5. So we have to add the value of a half bath to pretend as if it was just like the subject property. And a half bath is estimated to be valued at 5,000. So we're going to plus another 5,000 here. And this house does not have a garage. If it doesn't have a garage at all, the cost to build one, let's just say, is 10,000. So we're going to add $10,000 to its value. Okay. Now those are all of them. So let's add up these adjustments. We got 10, 15. I'm sorry. Uh, we have 15 and 5. That's 20 plus 10. That's 30. So the total is $30,000 in adjustments. It's sold for 300. So this would make an adjustment that this house, if it were exactly the same as the subject, would have sold for $330,000. Okay. Now let's move on to comp two. It sold for $325,000. It has 4 bedrooms like the subject property, only has 2 baths, not 2.5, and it has 1 car garage. So the only adjustment we need to make is for a half bath. Half bath is 5,000. So we're going to add a half bath. It sold for 325. That would put it in the 330 price range as well, if it were exactly the same. Now comp number 3 sold for 335. Has 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a 2-car garage. So the only difference is it has an extra garage space. So remember, the difference for an additional garage space is $6,000. So we're going to subtract $6,000 because it has a garage space the subject property does not. So we're going to subtract from its value $6,000. So it's sold for $335. That would bring it down to $329. So now we have a more accurate price range. And it looks like the price is more along the lines of $330,000, right? You see how making these adjustments can give you a more accurate price range now? Now, if you ask me, well, how do you come up with the value of a bedroom or a half bath or a garage or an extra garage? Well, experience, taking classes like that Ottawa class, they could give you those adjustment charts. Here, let me try to close it some of my windows I got open here. Try to show you in a
fixtures they have used in the rooms.
I'm sorry?
I mean, the fixtures they have included in the rooms or bathrooms.
Yeah,
The cost of
you could make adjustments for fixtures and stuff, but fixtures, if it's just like a different lighting fixture or something like that, it may make a little bit of a difference, but not a huge difference.
or
So
maybe one has a normal bathtub or second has jacuzzi in it.
yeah, you
So
may make
that
adjustments for jacuzzis, hot tubs, swimming pools, things of that nature. Yeah. The bigger ticket items, Otherwise, the small items, it makes a little bit of difference. More, instead of value, it would probably make more of a difference in desirability for it to be sold faster. So let me see these workshops with the pricing valuations and adjustment guides. Let me open up my adjustment guide here. So we have an adjustment guide here that you would take by going to one of these classes. You could see that in a house let's see, today, $250,000 in New Jersey is even becoming scarce now. So let's say $400,000 in the $400,000 price range. If we're going to make an adjustment simply for, let's see, a half bath. See, half bath and full bath, they already have that price over here for us. Am I sharing this with you? Yes, I am. So we could make an adjustment for in a $400,000 price range, it'd be a 2% difference in value. So $8,000 if it is exactly 400,000 or up to 400,000, it's 2% difference in value that you would add if it has an extra half bath, or subtract that amount if it didn't, if it had a half bath less. Full bath, 15,000 or 3.8% of the property's value. What about bedrooms? Do they have a listing here for bedrooms? No. I wonder why. Appraisers do make notations of the number of bedrooms. Well, because it goes by square footage of the house. So See, quality, age, condition, bathrooms, gross living area. There you go. That's your per square foot. In a house in the $400,000 price range, $80 per square foot. In a $750,000 price range, it'd be $110,000 per square foot. So you could do the measurements of the house, try to come up with the valuation based on gross living area. Okay. You know how much your house is worth and what the approximate value is in the neighborhood? In my neighborhood, my houses here in my neighborhood, they're not huge, except for those new McMansions that they're building. That's a different story. But the average houses, those Cape Cods that you buy around here, they're what, uh, maybe 1,200 square foot in size to 1,500 square foot. Just say 1,200. So 1,200 square foot times, they're somewhere in between the 400 and 750 range. So let's just call it $95 a square foot. So times $95 dollars a square foot.
You told us that the burnt house in
Yeah,
front of your it was sold at the land's price or the house
they
price.
they they bought it and then they bought it for a cost and then put money into it. So the loan that they used to buy the property went towards purchasing the property and fixing it up. But that house, the second floor burnt down. The rest of the house, I'm sure, had plenty of fire damage, smoke damage, and water damage. So they had Servpro going in there fixing it up and everything, and then they stopped that project. And then somebody came in, they spent a boatload of money on it, which I didn't even think the houses in this neighborhood were worth for a burnt out shell of a house. Then they dumped more money into it, and now they put up one of those McMansions. I don't even like the style of houses they have. They're mostly window, but they built these new houses that are much larger there in its place, and that's going up all around me in my neighborhood. So let's just say that my house, if it was for like $95 a square foot for living area, that's 95 times 1,200. That's $114,000 only. So now let's also take into consideration the basement. It has a full basement, so that's another $32,000. Right, we're up to 146 now. It is I actually do have a walkout on mine, so that's to add another $12,000 to it. Uh, the HVAC system, I don't have central air. We have individual units here. So you really don't see how to price it based on that, but let's just throw in a couple grand. Let's throw in 3,000, say. Um, the
Oh, I
bathroom,
thought in US there are only centralized systems. Oh, I
no.
didn't know that. Okay.
In my house, I don't have central air. I have wall units. They're through the wall. They're
Mm-hmm.
not through the window. I'm about to replace them and upgrade them with uh, what do you call them? The ductless units.
Mm-hmm.
They work very well, and you don't have to use up a lot of the spacing in the closets and behind the walls to run ducts. You could just have and worry about having to clean them and everything. You have those more efficient. I think they're more efficient, those ductless units. Okay.
Yeah, in India we have wall units only. Very few houses have these. Only the maybe the commercial buildings or the very premium houses have these central AC systems.
Yeah. Well, they cost a lot of money to run, maintain too.
Yeah,
You know.
correct.
But let's see. Uh, I'm adding up all these adjustments here. These prices that they're giving us here, are not for determining the entire value of the property. They're more for along the lines of determining the differences in size. Okay, because based on me just running these numbers based off of the total square footage of the houses here, it doesn't make sense. I'm trying to also add up, the garages, the patios, the bathrooms, the all that other stuff. The values are going up, but I could see it's not going to come anywhere near what the market value is asking for it right now. So that's why some of this stuff, the cost has little to do with value. You have to just look at the comparable sales, what some people are willing to pay for them in the neighborhood, and then you can make adjustments based on these valuations for the differences in size. Okay, but you don't add up this to the whole value to get the whole value of the house. Look, that wouldn't make sense. Let's say we have a let's say we have a 5,000 square foot house or 4,500 square foot house. Okay. We got a 4,500 square foot house and it's going for 2.5 million. Right. So, 2.5 million dollars. Uh, and we divide that by 4,500 square foot. That would put it at $550 per square foot. See over here, it's only 220. So we're not talking about the construction costs here. We're talking about the differences. If you're going to make adjustments for the differences. So we use these guides are kind of helpful. Like if the house is on a private street, the cul-de-sac, um, it makes your house worth more. If you're within high tension power lines within 100 feet, it makes it worth less. But how much less is the question, right? What about the bathrooms? Well, if it has a half bath, it could make it worth more, or you could subtract that amount. But look, if you did a new bathroom, you just remodeled it, it's brand new. You have to adjust for the dollar cost of the repairs. If the cost exceeds 1% of the home value, then adjust for 2 times the cost. For the age, the differences in age. You take the sales price times by 60% times 0.005 times the age difference. That's the formula that appraisers use to determine the difference in value if the only difference was age of the house. Taking this class will teach you a lot more. Plus, you could ask the appraiser a lot of questions, the appraiser instructor a lot of questions. If you have better quality materials and workmanship in one house, that can make a percentage difference here. Especially, it seems to be more of a difference in the more expensive homes. Jumps up. That's strange in the 1.25 million range versus the 2.5 million range. It goes down in how much it makes in a difference. The pool, in-ground pool, can make your house worth more, but you're not going to get all the value back. What if that costs $50,000 to install a new pool, in-ground pool? How much more is it going to make your $400,000 home worth? Is it going to make it worth more? Yeah, but not worth enough to get all that money back. It increases the value by 12,000 or 3% of the home's value. Different values for different price range homes. So price range homes take into consideration neighborhood. So you don't got to look into desirability, quality of neighborhood, or anything like that. Because if you start doing that, how are you coming up with that determination of the quality of the neighborhood and everything? That could lead into discrimination zone. So instead, just look at it like this: how much are people paying for houses in that area? That'll tell you if it's a good neighborhood or not. A better neighborhood, you're going to probably pay more for the house. Okay. Crappy neighborhood, you pay less. It's just the way it works. Let people's money do the talking. And that's why you don't talk about quality of neighborhood, because that's also subjective depending on the people, right? If it's on a busy road, well, busy road, most people don't want their kids playing in busy roads, so it's worth less. But how much less? cul-de-sacs. Now look at it. When it comes to the size of the lots, you mentioned this before. It only starts to make a difference if we're talking about a half acre or an acre or more per half acre or per acre. We're not talking about, you know, it's 5 feet wider than your property, than the neighbor's property. You know, that's not going to make a difference, not unless it can be subdivided and you could tear it down and put two houses on it. Then that could make more of a difference in the value. But then you got to look at zoning laws and regulations. And if this makes sense to buy this house at this value, then tear it down and put up two houses, um, would it financially make sense to do? If not, then you're not going to make an adjustment for the value of the land size, right? So we got some theory and some actual facts and hard data that we put into determining the values there. Okay, so taking these classes from these appraiser groups, uh, teaching us how to do this and use these charts with the data that they've aggregated and how they value properties can be very useful to us without us being appraisers. Okay.
So how will it add value to our profession? I mean, it's just the extra knowledge, right?
Yeah, you well, first of all, you could be more confident in your pricing of your homes. You price the homes properly, they sell quicker, right? You're more knowledgeable than the other agents. Where do you come up with that valuation? What if somebody asks you that? You're going in for a listing and they say, "Well, how did you come to that value? My neighbor's house sold for this." Yeah, but your house is not exactly the same. Condition, age, amenity. I make adjustments for the differences. You know, how long ago did it sell? You need to make adjustments for time because market values fluctuate over time. Where in the market value? Was it in the high swing or the lower swing of the adjustment period? So where in time? That's a difficult calculation to make actually for time, but it's an important one. You got to take a comp that recently sold. What is recently within the last month? We start talking 3 months, 5 months, 6 months. We're talking about different markets, different places in time, different valuations, depending how quickly the market is moving in your area. You know, so if we're looking at comps that sold a year or 2 years ago, it's not so accurate. We got to make an adjustment for time. Those are the only comps that you could find, right? Okay, so we have the CMA adjustment guides. We just went over how to price and make adjustments, but how do you know how much to adjust for each thing? You could take a class with like groups like Ottawa, which are groups of appraisers that train you on that. The Realtors Association has a pricing strategy class that could possibly help as well. But I'm assuming that local appraisers can probably teach you how to do it better. And you get additional guides from them, which are very helpful. Now, your brokers will probably train you just by giving you that regular price range, like I said with the previous slide, um, where you look up the comps and you can see the price range they sell within 300 to 335. But as we did the adjustments, we were able to narrow it down more accurately and see that the price range of 330 would probably be better to price this house at more accurately. So we don't overprice it, don't underprice it. It'll probably sell quicker too. So learning to properly value property is a skill. Your brokers may train you, but how good are they at it? Try taking a class learning from appraisers by taking a CMA workshop by Ottawa. In addition to offering or that pricing strategy from the Realtors Association, or there we go, pricing strategies from the Realtors Association. Oop, that's not how you spell strategies. Okay, come on, mouse. Get me back there. Okay. There we go. Uh, from the Realtors Association. In addition to offering CE credits towards your license renewal, it will help you with it will help you price properties more accurately and sell homes quicker, have better list to sale price ratios, etc. On the following slide, it shows a sample of an older adjustment guide you get from such courses that could assist in determining how much to adjust for certain features and amenities. And so I added this into the slideshow here. Um, this is just a sample. This is from an older adjustment guide. So um, take these classes to get the newer ones with the newest, latest price, adjustments that tells you when to adjust for different features. All right. So once again, cost relates to the past, price relates to the present, and value relates to the future. So this is how the owner sees their home value when selling. The appraiser looks at it like this. The real estate agent may look at it like this, and the seller looks at it like this. They have unrealistic expectations. And we have to help try to get them to overcome those unrealistic expectations most of the time. And usually the homeowner thinks their house is worth way more than it really is. So that could become a problem. So, you know, any reputable person in sales never asks somebody how much you think your product is worth that you're selling. Um, but we do it for a certain reason. We do it to find out if the person is operating on planet Earth or if they are crazy in their expectations of the valuation of their property. We already probably put together some sort of evaluation for them, doing a CMA. But really, ultimately, the only valuation that really matters is what the appraisal says. If the seller doesn't like our valuation or they think that we're too low, say, listen, I can list your price at whatever asking price you want. You overprice it, it's going to sit on the market too long. It's going to get stale to the market, and you'll never get anywhere near what it's even actually worth because you overpriced it. And the first price adjustment you're going to do is going to be greater than my entire commission. And you were probably arguing with me over 1%, of that commission. So this is a big hurdle for us as real estate agents to get to. Even if you determine how to value properties perfectly, when it comes down to it, we still need to deal with people. And they may be like, okay, I see how you valued it, but I don't care. I want this much. I think my house is worth more. You know, where did you come up with that number? Well, that's just how much I think it's worth. It's like banging your head against the wall. It needs to be justified by some sort of a comparison. Appraisers are going to determine values based on comparable sales. And they don't care how much a homeowner wants for their house. They care about what it's worth. And they do that based off of solid data and not just because I want that much, because I think it's worth that much. And no buyer, unless they're buying all cash, is going to rely on how much a seller wants. They're going to base it off of the appraisal. They can make a higher offer, but if the appraisal comes in lower, they're not going to go through with it and purchase that house for that higher amount. And even if you get somebody to say, well, we just need to get a cash buyer then. Okay, so okay, wise guy, if that's the approach you're taking, do you generally think that people who have that much cash laying around to buy your house all cash are generally stupid people? Probably not. So, what makes you think that they would knowingly overpay for what market value is to buy your house? They're not. Not if they have half a brain. There are rare circumstances where people pay over market value, but that's maybe because the house, compared to other houses, are already in move-in condition and exactly the way they want it, instead of having to do additions or repairs or improvements to get the house just like they want it. And they're willing to sacrifice and overpay a little bit just to get it now and not have to deal with construction and permits and all that. Okay. But that's not the norm. Okay. So the cost based approach to value is based on the theory of substitution. This is often also referred to as an appraisal by summation. Summation, you're summing things up. Sounds like math to me. Um, and that's exactly what it is. These are the cost approach to value is used to determine the value of special purpose, unique, or one of a kind type properties, or public properties that don't have comparables or generate income in the normal fashion. Like, how would you value a school, a church, a library, or a unique one of a kind custom home? They don't have comparables, they don't generate income in the normal way. You need to use the cost approach to value. So, what kind of properties do you use the cost approach to determine value before we even learn about how to do it? Special, unique, one of a kind, public properties or unique properties that don't have comparables or generate income. Boom. Schools, churches, libraries, custom homes. This approach is most often used by appraisers and not by salespeople due to the knowledge that's required. So we're going to have this slide building up. There's actually 5 steps here. So we're going to go over them. Each slide is going to add those additional steps until we get to the last one, and then you can take a screenshot of it. But the process for valuing using the appraisal by summation or the cost approach is you estimate value of the land without its improvements if it were put to its highest and best use, a term we just learned, right? Highest and best use is what? A use that is most in demand or for the use that generates the highest income or the most in demand in the reasonable near future, the highest value. So we estimate the value of the land without the improvements at its highest and best use. Then we estimate the current cost of construction, including all those site improvements. How much would it cost to put that building on this property on the raw land today? Now, there's 2 ways that this value can be determined. We could use the replacement or the reproduction cost approach. So let's first have these highlights on page 311 and 312 about what the cost approach is and what those 5 steps are. Okay, gave enough time there. Somebody could pause it if they want to, if they're watching the video, the recorded video here.
So
Okay.
sales approach is done by all of us, and cost approach is done by appraisers only
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have the
because it
knowledge
is
to,
for
yeah,
you
we don't have the
specific.
knowledge to do this.
Okay.
Yeah. As you can see, um, do you
Churches
know,
and schools and
yeah.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how to determine the value of constructing a building and all the site improvements? Probably not. This class ain't going to teach it. So most real estate agents don't know this. So it's beyond the scope of our knowledge. So we don't use cost approach. Even though we could determine the price of land put to its highest and best use, the cost of the improvements to the land and all that, that's beyond our scope. So we estimate the cost to construct the site improvements using replacement or reproduction cost approaches. So what is reproduction and replacement costs? There's 2 approaches that can be used. Reproduction cost is the cost to build an exact duplicate of that building using today's current prices for the materials and construction. Replacement cost is the cost to construct a new building that serves the same purpose, but it's not necessarily an exact duplicate. You know, like, let's just say you got a house that has a custom high-end kitchen with all fancy granite or some other material countertops, custom cherry wood cabinets with inlays and glass, and everything is fancy and expensive, right? Custom appliances, expensive appliances. You have a fire in your kitchen, okay? Is the insurance company going to give you the money to replace it exactly with the same exact materials that was there? Or are they just going to give you money to to fix the kitchen so you have a place to store your dishes and cook your food and prepare your food? Well, it depends on what insurance policy you have. There's actually a reproduction and replacement cost insurance policy. Reproduction cost is a little bit more expensive, but it'll replace it with exactly what was there before. Replacement cost policy would only replace it with something that serves the same function. Laminate countertops you could still prepare food on. Nothing fancy as far as kitchen cabinets. You could still store your dishes and cups in, right? What about a church? If a church had a fire, a reproduction cost would rebuild it exactly as it was with those same granite floors and walls and materials that are more high end. If you had the replacement cost approach, it would replace it with a structure that could fit enough pews where people can come and gather and pray. It doesn't have to be all fancy. So it's not necessarily an exact duplicate, but it serves for the same functional purpose. Okay. Now, appraisers determining which approach to use, how do they do that? Well, on page 313, there's a guide there. We're not going to go over that guide, but there's a guide there for you if you were interested in learning about how do they determine which approach they should use. Insurance companies use the same methods. I just showed you an example. They send out their own insurance adjuster to determine the value of a claim to pay out. You could always hire your own private public adjuster who would work for you to try and get you as much money out of your insurance company as they possibly can. The insurance adjusters that your insurance company sends out, they work for the insurance company. They want to be able to fix it up with the least cost possible to the insurance company. So they usually do not look to get you the most money out of the claim. If you hire your own public adjuster, they do because they get a piece of it. They get a percentage of what they're able to get you. So these are the highlights for reproduction and replacement costs. Then they estimate the accrued depreciation after you determine which cost to construct that you're going to use, the replacement or reproduction cost. You need to know the difference between replacement and reproduction cost for exams. You estimate the accrued depreciation of the improvement, not the land, because land does not depreciate. So you estimate based on the age of the building and everything, how much did it depreciate over the years, the improvement. And then we add the cost of that back into the overall sale. So depreciation, what is that? It's a loss of value due to an improvement due to any cause or condition. And as a general rule, land does not depreciate. Need to know that for exams. There's a lot of questions on exams out of this chapter, by the way. Okay, depreciation can be, let me see, curable and incurable forms of depreciation. You could have physical deterioration. The wood rots. Can you fix that? Is it curable? Sure, you could do repairs. All right, we're going to learn now about something called functional obsolescence. I'm going to show you on exams how to determine this without memorizing anything. If you forget totally what these words mean, and the best way to teach you that is to teach it to you by guessing what these words mean. What is functional obsolescence? Well, let me ask you a question. What does it mean if something's functional? Let's look at the first word. If something's functional, what does that mean?
It's working in working condition.
It's in working condition. It works. And if something's obsolete, the root word from obsolescence, if something is obsolete, what does that generally mean?
It's it's not uh,
It, it means it's outdated.
not of no use.
Well, no, not necessarily. If something is obsolete, say you have an old computer, would
Yeah.
it can it still work? Could it still work for you?
Mm.
Sure, but
Yes.
it's kind of slow. It's outdated. Um, it's not considered desirable by today's standards. Okay, so if something's functional, that means it works, but it's outdated and not considered desirable by today's standards. With real estate, let me give you an example of functional obsolescence. A 5 bedroom, 1 bathroom house. That house suffers from functional obsolescence. Look, that one
Because yeah,
bathroom could be large, it could be modern and recently updated and beautiful.
doesn't matter.
There's still five
Five
bedrooms, and
bedrooms.
all
Yeah.
them people from 5 bedrooms fighting over that one bathroom, right?
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
what makes it functionally obsolete. All right, how do I get rid of this thing? I'll put my hand down, lower hand. There we go. All right, now, so it means there's nothing wrong with the property other than its features are considered to be outdated and undesirable by today's standards. It's functional, but obsolete. Is it curable? Yeah, you could do updates. You could put additions on, add another bath. All right, now let's look at this other term we need to know for exams as well. I mean, physical deterioration, we know what that is. We don't need to study that. But terms like functional obsolescence, we never heard this before, or external obsolescence. But I just showed you how to figure out what functional obsolescence is just by examining the words. Functional means it works. Obsolescence, well, comes from the root word obsolete, which means it's outdated by today's standards and not considered desirable. And it is curable. External obsolescence, external means outside your property, something that's not on your property, that's making it obsolete, like the local economy or the location of your property. There's nothing you could do about that, right? The local economy is usually beyond your control, right? The location of the property is too. So, items not on the subject property, external to the site, however, they do have an effect on the property's value or desirability. This type of obsolescence is almost always incurable because you have no control over factors on someone else's property or the local economy. So if you get questions on exam, which you probably will, so you need to know the difference between functional obsolescence and external obsolescence, and that depreciation is a loss of value due to any cause or condition. And as a general rule, land does not depreciate. Only the improvement to the land does. So if you want to snap a picture of this slide, be my guest. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll show you what to highlight in the book. And here's what you could highlight in the book: depreciation, functional obsolescence, physical, functional, and external obsolescence. Okay, the cost approach. Let's see. After you've depreciated the value, uh, or you calculated the depreciation on the improvements to the property that we've determined, after we figured out the cost to construct the site improvements, then you add the value of the land back in, okay? Because you could only depreciate the value of the improvement, not the land. So then we add the value of the land back in. The only time you could depreciate land is under extreme circumstances, like if it was contaminated. So if you want to snap a picture, these are the 5 steps of what an appraiser does. They estimate the value of the land at its highest and best use, estimate the cost to construct using one of the two approaches, replacement or reproduction costs. Then they estimate the accrued depreciation to the improvement. Then they deduct that depreciation from that improvement. And then they add the value of the land back
How about the wetlands, which we discussed in this
in. Mm-hmm.
class? The value of the wetlands depreciate or not? No.
Well, no, because the land is already there, not unless it's now underwater, like actual physically underwater. It's just got a high water table. Wetlands are, if you live in a flood zone, you live in an area with a high water table that's more likely to flood when it rains or when there's storms because the river maybe overflows and floods your property. Okay. So nothing's changed with that. Not unless the sea levels actually rose in your area and they stay consistently at that risen level. Okay. So you're now underwater. Like the Meadowlands, the tide went out and never came back. What if the tide came in and flooded an area and never went back out? We're talking about what if scenarios here. I can't give you an example of that happening anywhere in our area other than politicians talking about it, promising that it's going to happen in the future by some date that they picked out of the air at random. So the income approach is used for any property that generates income. In your book, on the margin, did you put this in there? If not, you should put this in there. Do these highlights and then put this in the margin there. Um, this is just using the T formula to calculate the income approach to value. Now, what do you put on that T is the annual net operating income. That goes up top. The property value on one side and the cap rate or percent on the other side. What is a cap rate? Cap is short for capitalization rate. It's a measurement of the rate of return of an investor's money. So if an investor purchases a property, how long is it going to take them to recoup their money, their investment? Okay. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to minimize this just for a second. I'll bring it right back, I promise. Give me 1 second here. I just need to get to something. Okay, I got a screen open that I needed. Sorry about that. You go back full screen so that you can continue taking those notes. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so you're writing this in the margin, right? It's just showing you how to calculate cap rates or determine the value of a property based on the annual income. And you're using the T formula to do that. So as you write that down, I could go through my notes for something else.
Done.
Okay, so let me see. Oh, no. Thought I had something in my notes here. Let me search. Maybe I do. Not in that folder. Okay. So let's see. Okay, I got a little information. I was going to put something together in the slides. I just have not done it yet. Okay, so how long would it take, to recover your money? Let's see. If you have to determine that with cap rates, you'd have to look at the payback period is equal to 1 divided by the cap rate. So 6%, if you have a 6% cap rate, you'll recover your investment in 16.67 years. 5% cap rate, you'll get it back in 20 years.
Is there any chart? Where are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm
It's
looking at it.
calculating.
Yeah, I'm looking at it in I did a little conversation with
Oh, okay.
AI, and I got my notes here this way. How cap rate is defined. Okay. Let's see. It gives me this math this way. So what it really means is you're earning if you have a 6% cap rate, you're earning 6% of your investment back each year in the net operating income. So if nothing changes, rents, expenses, vacancy, etc., it takes 16 years and 8 months to earn the full amount back that it costs you to purchase this investment building. So that does not include appreciation, loan amortization, tax benefits, rent growth, just pure net operating income. So for quick comparisons here for different periods, see, payback period equals 1 divided by the cap rate. So that doesn't tell you a whole lot there. But here's the graphic where they had the math already worked out. Now we could
It's
calculate
not,
what
are these fixed or it's a maths problem?
Yeah, but this is just telling you if you have a 6% cap rate, it'll take you 16.67 years to recoup your money. 4%, it'll take you 25, 5%, 20, 7%, 14.29 years, 8%, 12 and a half years. Okay. So the way he did it is, let's see, 6%, 1 divided by 0.06. Does that work out that way to calculate the cap rates? Let's take a look. 1 divided by 6%. Yeah, 16.67 years. So that's actually the formula on how to figure out if you know the cap rate, how long it'll take to pay back. Okay. So yes, all cash purchases and the NOI stay constant. Does not include appreciation. Okay. So we could go to the slide. We could add something like that in there, a little note. Actually, I got math that's coming up here. Income approach to value. Uh, I could add a slide in there about the cap rates. So let me just throw that in really quick as well, right behind this one. Put these slides together real quick on the go for you. So calculate how many years an investment will take to pay itself off at a certain cap rate. This is the formula to use. Now I should also put in there their disclosure that we have on that slide. So cap rates assume all cash purchase and NOI stays constant. Okay. It does not include appreciation, amortization, tax benefits, or rent growth. And whoop, so it's basically 1 divided by cap rate. Oops. All right, so all right, I just made a new custom slide for you. You back it up so you can see it. Okay, so after this one, should have paused the recording for that, but after this one, I put together this slide that shows you. That's missing the title. Where did the title go? Where's the title? Huh. I don't know why that took a while to sneak back in there. Okay, there's an animation apparently. Let's remove that. None. There we go. There we go. So cap rate of return calculation. To calculate how many years an investment will take to pay itself off at a certain cap rate, this is the formula to use. Actually, the formula is right down here. 1 divided by the cap rate equals the payback period. Okay. Cap rates assume all cash purchases and with no mortgage or loan or anything, because different people can get loans at different interest rates, etc. So let's just say that you own the property outright. If you bought it at a certain price, you bought all cash. Um, how long will it take you to get your money back? So this is a figure that a lot of investors use, the cap rates. Um, And here's a chart that shows you it's figured out. Now you could figure it out if you have a different cap rate that does not show in these charts. You could just take 1 divided by the cap rate equals the payback period. Um, so if you got a property and it's got a 6% rate of return, that's 16.67 years to get back the purchase price of the property. Now, I guess you could also try to factor in, interest rates and all that, but cap rates are generally not factoring that in. But if you want to know what your own expenses are, I guess you can figure that into the cap rate, but you don't have to. This is the way that they are. This way, you could pass on one cap rate to an owner to another. So, income approach to value is based on the present worth of future rights to income used for valuation of property that generates income. Apartment buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, multifamilies, etc., using 2 common approaches to value, either cap rates, which we just discussed a little bit, or GRM. That's the gross rent multiplier. So cap rates are short for capitalization rate, and it's a measurement that determines the rate of return on an investor's money. The GRM, the gross rent multiplier, this compares 2 income producing properties to determine the value when the financial information isn't readily available. We can make an educated guess to come up with a price range using the information from the property that we do have all the information from. So basically, if in the MLS a property's listed, but they don't have all the details, what are the incomes and the expenses listed? We could figure it out still, usually, by taking an educated guess of what the income and expenses should be by looking at the income and expenses of another similar property. It's kind of like how we value residential real estate, right? We look at the comparables and then make adjustments for the differences. We could do that here, but we're looking for comparable properties to borrow their income and expenses. What do I mean by that? If we want to figure out what the numbers are for a property without calling the owner and asking them for their financial information that they may want to first not disclose to you unless you sign some legal documents that, non-disclosure agreements that you're not going to disclose any of this information to anybody in the public. Instead of going through all that, just to figure out if this is a property that your client's even interested in seeing, what you could do is you could look up other properties in the area that are similar. Let's just say that we're talking about a 4-family house, okay? And this 4-family house consists of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom apartments. Can we say that in a general area of town within close proximity, we have 2 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms are going for approximately the same amount? I mean, they're not exactly the same. You'll find properties that ask different amounts for a 2-bedroom rental, but can we generally accept and say that 2 bedrooms in this neighborhood are going for this price range? and come up with a figure based on what other rentals are actually renting for in that area? Yeah. So we could take that factual data that we have on another property in that neighborhood to look at how much 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms rentals are going for. And then we could apply it to this property to determine what uh, this property's income is being generated. It's a guesstimate. It's not meant to be 100% accurate, but it's a guesstimate. It'll get us in the price range. And then we can look at the expenses on that other 4 family house and compare it to the expenses on this 4 family. They should generally be in the same price range. We're talking about 4 families in the same area. You know, they should be, having the approximate same expenses, taxes, maintenance costs, etc. They should be in the same ballpark. So basically, the gross rent multiplier is calculated by guesstimating, using these guesstimated expenses to figure out the value of the property. And we could do that. And it'll get us in the price range. It's not 100% accurate. Cap rates would be. But we don't have all the information to do the cap rate on this property. So we do a GRM. And then there's something called a GIM, gross income multiplier. It basically takes properties that generate income. We're using the gross rent multiplier that uses income from the real estate. And the GIM also adds in income from non-real estate generating income things like a concession stand or selling T-shirts, on the property. It's factoring in those incomes as well. You're not going to get that one on exam, though. I'm telling you right now. GRM and cap rates, you need to know. GIM, you need to know for answering the questions at the end of this chapter. Here's the math on calculating cap rates and the gross rent multiplier. You need the T formula. And for figuring out cap rates specifically, that small number that goes on top is your annual net income. Net income is your income after expenses. Income before expenses would be the gross. This is the net. So we need to have 2 of these 3 figures to figure out the missing thing. If we know what the net annual income is on a property and the cap rate that we want to get back, the rate of return we're seeking, we could divide the income divided by that cap rate to figure out how much money we should offer on this property. Or if you have a property and you want to see what its cap rate is, you take the annual net income, divide it by the value of the property to figure out what the cap rate is. And then you could advertise that cap rate. Hey, we got this property up for sale with a cap rate of whatever the percent is. And then the gross rent multiplier, this reverse T formula is only used to figure this out. The regular T formula can be used to figure out a lot of different math problems. The reverse T formula, only used to figure out the gross rent multiplier. Basically, the property value goes up top. It's the reverse of the normal for the property. The large numbers on the bottom. The large number goes up top, property value. And then the smaller number in this case is not a net annual income. It's the gross monthly income. And then we need to have the multiplier, which is not a percentage or a rate. It's a whole number. Okay. A multiplier is a number that's insignificant in itself. It's just a number used to compare 2 things. Okay. In this case, 2 income producing properties. So we could calculate what the GRM is for a property to figure out the multiplier and then use that number on another property. I'll show you how. Right now, it may not make much sense, but I'll show you how, and then it'll make sense. But remember, when you're doing this using the gross rent multiplier, you can only compare a 3-unit building to another 3-unit building. You cannot compare a 3-unit to a 4 or 5-unit building. You have to be comparing the same thing here. Okay. 3-unit to a 3-unit, a 4-unit to a 4-unit. Okay. Otherwise, it won't work. So, based on the present worth of future rights to income, used for valuation of property that generates income, apartment buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, multifamily homes, etc., using two common approaches, either cap rates or GRM. When calculating the cap rate, we're measuring the rate of return on the investor's money using the T formula. And we need to have two of the three components to figure out the third missing one. We need to know the annual NOI, the value, or the cap rate. We need to have two of those to figure out the missing one. Now, how do we figure out the net NOI? Well, you take the gross operating income of a property. Those are annual income before expenses. Then we add up what all the annual expenses are, except for we do not calculate the financing costs for any mortgage loan. And then we get the net. So income minus expenses equals the net. GOI, gross operating income, minus GOE, gross operating expenses, equals the net operating income. Now, the gross rent multiplier, you compare two similar buildings, 3-unit to a 3-unit, a 4-unit to a 4-unit, etc., using the reverse T formula. So we're using a whole number here, not a percentage like in the cap rates, which is an insignificant number in itself. Like I said, there's no such thing as a good or a bad multiplier. It's just a number used to compare two similar income producing properties. So we need to have two of these three components to figure it out: the gross monthly income, the value, or the GRM, the multiplier itself. And remember that GIM, it's just the GRM plus additional revenue from things that are non-real estate related, like a concession stand. The income's not coming from real estate. So we're not going to bother ourselves with it here. And here's the formula for that. So on page 315, next to gross rent or income multiplier, write that reverse T formula. And put a note here where it says similar properties. That's 3-unit to a 3-unit, 4-unit to a 4-unit, etc. Property value up top, GRM, gross monthly income on one side, on the bottom, and the GRM, which is not a percentage number, goes on the other. You taking any of those notes, or you already have that stuff? You already got it? Okay.
Got it.
So once again, here's that slide with both the formulas and showing you how to calculate it. Now, appraisers, when they appraise values, there's three approaches to value. When they do appraisals, they try to use all three approaches to value and calculate all three approaches for every property, and then use the most profitable approach. This is known as reconciliation, a word you will see on exam. You need to know what reconciliation is. It's when you apply more than one of the three approaches to value to the same property. This is reconciliation. And we can highlight that on page 316. If more than
It,
one of the three, yeah.
and income approach is done by appraisers.
Well, yeah, but we could do the cap rates too. We could calculate cap rates. Um, we could calculate GRM. So we could do this, or appraisers can, because we could sell income producing properties. And how do you determine the value of an income producing property? Based on the
So
income it
only
generates.
cost approach is done separate individually by appraisers. Otherwise, a sales approach and income approach, everyone can do that, right?
Correct. Correct. Although appraisers are probably more accurate in all of them. you know, they put a lot of
Yeah,
time
that's
and
their job.
years
Yeah.
in the studies to get it. Yeah. And that's just this one aspect of real estate. We learn a lot of different aspects of real estate, the laws, how to advertise, the sales, the contracts, the valuation. This is all about the valuation. That's all appraisers do. We do that and a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, they probably do it more accurate than us because this is all they do. That T formula works for a lot of stuff. All of these things in particular. And one of those items is calculating cap rates, number 3. So you need the net income annual that goes up top. And number 3, the market value on this side. Number 3, the cap rate on this side. So if you charge a seller 6% commission and the total commission collected was $21,600, how much did the property sell for? 21.6 divided by 6%, 360. I think we did this on day 1, right? Just to teach you how the T formula works. We just got a little refresher here. Another way of saying the same problem. You divide down, multiply across to find the missing component. Here we don't have a number up top to divide down, but we can multiply across the value of the property times the commission amount to figure out the commission of 21.6. So now we're familiar again. We got refamiliarized on how that T formula works with that simple commission problem. We have a question here. If a property sells for $400,000 with 3 units that rent for $1,200 a month each, with the following expenses, what would the cap rate be for this property? The expenses are, we know the income is in the problem here, so we could use that to figure out the income. Let's add up all the expenses, except there's a trick here you need to know. Not to use the financing mortgage payment, which will be different for each owner. So you got that 3,200 here. We got to ignore that. Don't use it. So we take the annual figures in calculating cap rates. Remember, we got to get the GOI minus the GOE equals the NOI. So what's the net annual income on this property? $1,200 a month for 3 units. So 3 times 12, 3,600. I'm sorry, 3 3 times 1,200, not 3 times 12. 3 times 1,200, that's 3,600 a month, and then times that by 12. Then you get the annual figure of $43,200 in gross income. Not bad. Just for owning real estate, right? Now we calculate the expenses by adding all of these up. If we have quarterly ones, like the sewer, which is $300 a quarter, well, 300, there's 4 quarters in a year. So 300 times 4 is 1,200. So you see in the brackets here, I already figured out the annual expenses. This is the easiest way to do it because some expenses may be monthly, some are quarterly. I calculated them all to be annually. Then we just add them all up and we get $16,560. Subtract the expenses from the income, and we're left with a net of $26,640. That's not a bad income per year just for owning real estate, right? And collecting the rents or providing a place for people to live. Hopefully, they don't destroy the property and cost us and eat into that, right? So to calculate the cap rate, we have it right here in the problem. It sells for 400,000. The large number goes on the bottom. What number goes on top? This net annual income.
Income.
So now we take 26,400, we divide down to figure out the cap rate. So what's the cap rate on this property at $26,640 divided by $400,000 selling price? We get a cap rate of catch your calculator out.
6.6%.
Let's see, drum roll, please. Yep, 6.6% cap rate. That wasn't too hard, was it? It's just multiple steps to figure it out, but it's all simple math. Don't get lost in the math. So at a rate of 6.6%, how many years would it take to pay that off? What did they say? Take 1 divided by 6.6%. 1 divided by 6.6%, which is 15.15 years to pay it off at that cap rate. Okay. All right, now that we figured that out, let's use the same figures from that previous property that sold for $400,000 with a gross monthly income of $3,600 and figure out what the GRM is for it. Here are the numbers that we need to put in to figure out the GRM. So what numbers do I put in here?
400,000. Income, 3,600 gross monthly income. Yeah.
And which number do I put in the calculator first?
Top big number.
TGIF, top number goes in the calculator first, right? So see how that TGIF works? So 400,000 divided by 3,600, and that gives us a GRM of
111.
111.11. Correct. Is that good or bad? Neither.
Yeah.
It's insignificant.
Seems,
it's just a number that we're going to use to compare two properties. Okay. But wasn't that even easier to figure out than cap rates?
Yeah.
Now, if they tried tricking you on exam and they give you the annual income, just divide it by 12 and then plug that number in here. Okay. So here's one that they give you that's a little tricky, like I just explained. If a property's for sale for $425,000 With $9,500 a year in taxes, $900 a year insurance, annual rents of $28,000 a year, and property expenses at $12,500 a year. What's the GRM for this property? It's a trick question. Do you know why? What numbers do we need to figure out the GRM?
Property value and monthly income, gross monthly
Gross
income.
monthly. So that means we don't need to know all these expenses that they gave us in the problem, right? See, this is how they write some problems to try to trick you. Uh, if you don't know what you're really looking for, you don't know what you're doing. They just give you a bunch of additional figures. So some people, they'll just be tapping the numbers in the calculator, seeing if it matches up with any of the answer options that are in the multiple choice. So, but that's not the way to do this. We take the annual rent of $28,000. Wait. GRM needs what income? Monthly, the gross
Monthly.
monthly. So we're going to have to divide that by 12 to get the monthly income and then stick that over here on this side along with that moving over that sale price and putting it up top, right? Monthly income goes right over here like that. And the GRM then would be 425 divided by 2333, and we get a GRM of 182.17. Even with the trick, it's not that difficult if you remember what the three figures are that you need to calculate it, right? You good, Sanchita? You doing good?
Bit tricky, but yeah, I have to remember all this. Yes.
It's a bit to remember. Nothing is rocket science, though. It's just a lot of information to remember, right? So like I said at the beginning of class, study is required. But you're doing good. I got confidence in you. You study, you got a good mind. You're all right.
I tried to do some problems, not problems, the questions from the book and the internet, and I was all the time I'm wrong. So I'm not sure what to do. I
You're
mean,
questioning
every
it a
time
little
the
bit.
wordings, there's a tricky wording in it, and then I realize, oh yeah, that's a different question.
Well, ask yourself a question about the question so that you don't get tricked by it. Ask yourself, what is this question asking of me? And then try to figure out the answer in your head before you ever look at the answer options. And if the question is too wordy, try to break it down to simpler understanding. Reword it in your own words so it's less wordy. Okay. And then usually you can figure it out. Okay. So we're going to have a couple of problems that are based out of this one. Okay. I'm going to show you how we're going to calculate the cap rate on this property. Then we're going to figure out the GRM for it. And then we're going to use that to try to determine the value of another property using the GRM. So we have an investor here that says he'll purchase a property if he could get an 8% return on his investment. That's pretty high. What's the actual cap rate on this property? I want to find out something else with the math that we learned today that you don't really need to know for exams, but it's interesting. 1 divided by 8%. He's looking to get all of his money back in 12 and a half years. All right. So if a property sells for $425,000, it has a 4-unit building, has 2 3-bedroom apartments renting for $1,500 a month each, and 2 2-bedroom units renting for $1,200 a month each. Yeah, those numbers don't exist anymore, right? What happened to that? That was just a couple of years ago. You could get apartments for that. No more. So what do we do? Add up the income, right? So 1,500 a month times two, that's 3,000. 1,200 a month times two, that's 2,400. Add those up, you get $5,400 a month. Times it by 12, and your gross operating income is $64,800. So what do we put in a T formula? Well, nothing yet. I mean, we could put the value up there, but we also need to calculate the expenses. And I already did that here. It's 23,520. So if we take the annual figures and put the GOI minus the GOE to get the NOI, 64,800 minus the 23,520 gives us $41,280 in net operating income. That's not too shabby at all. That's a great return. Is this investor going to get his 8% return on his investment, though? I don't know. How do we calculate cap rates? What numbers do we put in the T formula to figure out the cap rate to see if he gets his 8% return?
Um, Value? No.
And
And net income.
then we just divide down 41,280 divided by 425,000, and we get a cap rate of 9.7. Pretty good. He's definitely going to get, he'll definitely be happy with that. He's getting 1.7% more than he asked for. That's an excellent return on your investment. All right. So now that we have all these numbers for this property, we know that this property is an excellent investment. What's the GRM on this property? I got all the numbers on screen for you. Just need to do the calculation. What numbers do I need to do?
Property value and gross monthly income.
Okay. And we already have that here, 5,400.
Yes.
And we get a GRM of 78.70 with a cap rate of 9.7 for this area for a 4-unit building. Remember, we could only use GRM to compare one 4-unit building to another 4-unit.
Apple to apple.
Yep, got to compare apples to apples, correct. So let's take that number now and move on over to the next question. Here, using the reverse T formula and the GRM to figure out how much to offer on this property to get around the same approximate return from the previous slide with the other property. Now, these are not exact figures. It gets you in the ballpark once again. The GRM is a rough tool to compare another income-producing property that you don't have all the figures for, using an educated guesstimate. I invented that word, a guesstimate. I think I did anyway, to get you in the ballpark. So we agree that in the same neighborhood, one 4-unit building should have approximately the same expenses as another 4-unit building in that same neighborhood. And for a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom, they should be getting approximately the same rentals amounts. So it's not meant to be an exact science. It's not supposed to be 100% accurate. But it'll help us figure out the figures when we don't have all the numbers without having to sign a NDA, a non-disclosure agreement with the owner just to figure out if it's a property we even want to show to our client. So how much would we offer to get that same 9.7% cap rate for this other 4-unit building that is in the MLS for sale? We know it has 3 3-bedroom units and only 1 2-bedroom unit. But they don't even put down what the rental rates are. Well, can we borrow some of those figures from the other property that we do know what they are? Yeah. We know that the 3-bedroom units, were going for $1,500 each, and the 2 bedrooms were for $1,200. So 1,500 times 3 is 45. And then we have the one at 1,200. So we add that and we get $5,700 a month in gross operating income. So we stick that right there, right? And what was the GRM on the previous property? 78.70. So we just take the gross operating income, times it by the GRM to figure out how much we should offer. So we shouldn't offer any more than $448,590, and that'll get us in that same 9.7% rate of return area. Without us knowing the exact figures, it's a pretty cool tool, huh? If you know how to use it. Now, I'm going beyond showing you here. I'm going beyond what you need to know for exam. For exam, you just need to know how to calculate the GRM. I'm actually showing you how to implement it and use it in real life. Do you know, I've never come across a school that actually taught you how to do that. It's the wildest thing. They teach you how to figure it out for exams, but why do I need it? How do you use it in real life? A lot of them instructors probably don't even know. I'm showing you right here. Okay. Pretty cool stuff. And it's not rocket science. This one's a little more difficult to figure out. And they always give it on exams. See, I told you a lot of math in this chapter. These instructions are not whole. They could be better. The next slide where I show you how to work out the problem, it is. This is more of just an explanation of the breakdown of how we figure it out. It's not going to make sense by the time I'm done reading this until I actually show you how to do the math problem. Okay. So step one, determine which method that you're going to use on this math problem when calculating appreciation or depreciation. Usually the math problem is going to be how to calculate depreciation. There's 2 methods to do this, the straight line method or the compound method. The straight line method assumes that each year's rate of appreciation or depreciation is a percentage of the original value. So to solve, you'll multiply the annual percentage by the number of years it depreciated. If you're using the compound method, it's more accurate, but it requires repeating step 3 down here once for each year. So instead of saying, hey, this property depreciated over a period of 3 years, you take the rate of depreciation and times it by the number of years it depreciated. That's the straight line method. Compounding method, you don't do that. You just take the rate of depreciation and then you do the math problem once for each year. Next step is, are we talking about, remember, value equals 100%. If it's depreciating, we're subtracting from 100%. If it appreciated, we're putting a plus sign and adding to 100%. That's it. Okay, and now we're going to figure out, are we trying to determine a past value or a current value? If we're trying to determine a value in the past, we're going to divide. And if we try to figure out a current value, we're going to multiply. Now let me put it together. And here's the question for us. If you purchased a property 3 years ago and it depreciated in value 2% per year, and today's value is $400,000, how much did you purchase the property for? Use the straight line method. See, the question will tell you which method to use, straight line or compounding. If it does not tell you which method to use, you're going to use straight line method. So first of all, anytime we determine value, we start with 100%. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to first figure out, since it said straight line, we're going to take the rate of depreciation and times it by the number of years it depreciated, 6%. And then we're going to subtract that from 100 because we're trying to figure out all of the value. So the rate of depreciation is 94%. Okay, or 6%, but we subtract that because it depreciated in value. So if it appreciated, we put a plus sign here and it would be 106. Okay, but it depreciated, so we're subtracting from 100%. Now we take the value of the property. We're trying to figure out a value in the past, how much we purchased it for 3 years ago, divide it by 0.94, and there's our answer. Not too complicated of math. Okay, let's do another one using the same question, but doing the compound method. So I could show you side by side, straight line method versus the compounding method. Now, using the compound method, we don't do this part. We just go right to this part. So the rate of depreciation was 2% per year. So we take 100% and subtract it 2% from it, the rate of depreciation. That gives us 98% or 0.98. Now we're going to do that problem once for each year. 3 years ago, we take today's value of 400,000 and divide it by 0.98. That's how much it was worth a year ago. The value is going up because we're saying that the property depreciated. It lost value the last 3 years. So if it lost value, that means that we must have purchased it for a higher amount, right? So now we know that we're doing the math problem right by dividing instead of multiplying. Now we do it for another year, and we do it again for another year. And that's how much we bought the property for 3 years ago. Okay, that's the difference between straight line and compounding. You may want to snap a picture of this because it's not in the book. The book is not explaining this like this. Okay. We'll do a couple more of it just so you get a hang of it. If you purchased the property 3 years ago and it depreciated 2% in value, and today's value is 380,000, how much did you purchase the property for using the compounding method? So what do? What's the first step?
First, we will reduce 2% from 100.
Yep, we start off by
98%.
we start off by writing 100% because it always begins when we're determining value. We always start out, we're trying to figure out all of it. So we write down 100% on our scrap paper. And because the problem is that it depreciated, we put a minus sign here. And then we put the rate of depreciation, which is 2%. Now
and
what?
then we'll divide the value with 98%.
And why are we dividing?
Because we have to see the depreciation.
Well, because we're trying to figure out how much. We're trying to figure out a past value. How much we purchased it for. If we were trying to figure out a current value, this question said we bought the property for 380 and it depreciated 2% per year, how much is it worth today? Well, then you would multiply.
Multiply.
Okay. So I just want to make sure you're sure you're aware of that, because I'm just
Mm.
giving you that here, but on exams they're not going to give you that. So you take the 380 divided by 98, and that's how much it was worth 1 year ago.
Last year.
Now we take that number divided by 0.98 again. That's what it was worth 2 years ago. Take that number, divide it by 0.98 again, and there's the answer, 403, 473.
Yeah.
Okay. The hard part about this is all simple math. The hard part is remembering all the steps. I know, I'm there with
Exactly.
you. I feel you. I understand it. It's remembering the steps.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do another one. This time, if you purchased the property 3 years ago for 380,000 and it depreciated 2% per year using the compound method again, what is it worth today? So what do we do again?
Minus 2%, 98%.
Okay.
And then we will multiply
Okay. So
value with
we multiply this time because we're trying to figure out the current or future value, right? It gave us the past value. We're trying to figure out what it's worth now if it depreciated 2% per year. So 1 year later, 2 year later,
3
3 year later, we see the values going down. So we know
down.
that we're doing the right thing. If the value was going up, we know that we're doing something wrong. We should have that we probably were dividing still. So you got to put a little common sense to it too. If it's telling you that it depreciated but the value's going up, we know something's wrong, right? With our math. That's the way to catch ourselves. Okay. If you want to snap a picture of this one too, this is a little bit different because it showed you how to calculate a past value versus a future value. And I got the instructions there on the left-hand side, by the way, if you see. Determining value based on 100% using the straight line or compounding method. Then subtract from 100% if depreciation, add if it's appreciation. And then take the value provided and divide it by the amount of depreciation if looking for an amount in the past, multiply if looking for a current or future value. Do it once for straight line or once per year if compounding. Boom. Don't get nervous. Don't get freaked out. There ain't that many questions on state exam on math. Okay. As long as you get all the other stuff right, you're good. Okay. Now, appraisals are conducted by skilled licensed professionals called appraisers. They must be licensed. Appraisers charge fees for appraising. And there's several license types. There's four: the apprentice trainee, licensed appraiser, certified residential, and certified general. Who can appraise any type of property at any value?
General.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of license is required to do an appraisal?
Appraiser's license.
There you go. So you get the idea what to do there. All right. Now, how do we help people as real estate licensees value properties? We do CMAs or BPOs. The ones that we do usually complimentary for free for the public is the CMA. BPOs we usually do in exchange for a fee for lenders. And remember, I talked about, because you were asking about, well, what other reason do people get appraisals for? Well, here we go. Here's a bunch of reasons people do appraisals: for estate purposes when somebody dies, to establish the taxable value and facilitate fair division among the heirs. Yeah, New Jersey is one of those states that charge taxes on your when you die for all the stuff that you already paid taxes on when you were alive. Don't seem right, does it? For divorce proceedings, when
Only
people
New
get their,
Jersey or
oh no, many states do,
many states? Okay.
um, but not all of them. There's several states that do not charge for uh, they don't charge the estate, and more are starting to get that trend. At least the red states, the Republican states, they're starting to get more and more of them that don't charge. But it's hard because they got to fight the opposition, and they want your money all the time. Even after you die, they want to dig their hands into your cold, dead pockets to get some more. It just don't seem right. I worked all my life. I pay taxes all my life. And now I die and you want more. This is why it makes it harder for the Garden State to keep some of those farms. Our politicians are wanting to tax the estates. So now the kids, when they try to inherit the farm, the only way they're going to get to keep it is if they have enough money saved up to pay the estate tax for the value of that farm, which that ain't right. That's why a lot of people were fighting that. And actually, federal law, I think it was Donald Trump passed a federal law that would prevent that. But each state can still do their own thing. So states now, now it's up to the states, and some states are still doing it. Especially those that are fighting him. So divorce proceedings, they do appraisals to figure out what the value of the land, the property is, so that then the other can buy them out, buy out their other spouse. For financing, when you're looking to get a loan to buy real estate, right? Or refinance. For taxation purposes, to furnish documentation for taxpayers so that they could protest of assignment figures. For relocation purposes, so that relocation companies can pay the appropriate amount of the estimated value when an employee is being transferred. Sometimes a relocation company will buy it and then sell the property on their own, but the employee can get out quicker. For condemnation reasons, that's when a state uses their powers of eminent domain to take your property. How do we determine a fair price to pay you for it? Well, with condemnation hearing, we'll determine what that value is by having an appraisal done. For insurance reasons, to estimate the possible replacement expenses in case of loss. For damage or loss, to support income tax deductions. Or for feasibility studies, to study possible consequences of a particular use for a property. Okay, and remember, if you're an appraiser and you want to do FHA appraisals, you got to take that special class, designation class, to be approved to do FHA appraisals. Let's see. New Jersey now requires that appraisers be either licensed or certified by the state. So here's the process that appraisers go through when doing appraisals. They got to state what the problem is. This is their thought process. State the problem, list the data that they need and the sources where they could get it, gather and record and verify that necessary data, determine the highest and best use, estimate the land value, estimate the value of using each of the three approaches, do some reconciliation to estimate the value, and report the final value estimate. Appraisal form there's a special appraisal form that appraisers are required to use by many governmental agencies. It illustrates the detailed information required of an appraisal of residential property. And a blank one can be found on page 319. And we'll see it in 2 slides from now. So on page 318, we just highlighted Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP. That's that 15-hour class that appraisers are required to take every 2 years. Here's a sample of uniform standards of, here's a uniform residential appraisal report. Here's that standard report that all appraisers must use. What's that form number? 1004? Fannie Mae form 1004. Yep. Kind of looks like the CMA that we were doing, right? With the side by sides, we have the subject property and the comparable one, comparable two, comparable three, and we make the adjustments, right? But appraisers have a couple more math problems and statements and information that they need to list here as well. They got to list more data on theirs than we do.
Below this form, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac both are written.
Yeah, it's a
Federal.
standard form that must be
Okay.
used for all
For both.
appraisals for them. Yeah. All right. And here on page 320, we highlight MAI as the member of the Appraisal Institute. And New Jersey, in this circle here, New Jersey requires appraisals comply with standards and be performed by state licensed or certified appraisers. An exception is allowed in the rare event where a broker's price opinion is acceptable to a lender. The BPO should include a statement indicating that the report should not be considered the equivalent of an appraisal prepared by a New Jersey licensed or certified real estate appraiser. The statement should appear in print the size and as large as the main text in the report, no fine print, in other words. Any fees involved are payable to the agent's broker, and you get paid through the broker of record. All real estate appraisals for purchase purposes must be done by licensed or certified real estate appraisers. And the only exceptions are for CMAs provided to sellers or buyers to make their offers or what price they should list it for sale at to help guide them at that. And look, you as a real estate agent, if you want to get an appraiser's license, you could get partial experience credit towards appraisals by the CMAs that you have done in the real estate industry, because it's kind of similar to an appraisal. And those are the appraiser licenses again and the requirements for them. We already went over this earlier. And those are those MAI and what USPAP is, and the 4 types of appraiser licenses. And a note that to do FHA loans, you got to have that special designation to do those types of appraisals. Professional designations through the appraisal societies. New Jersey appraisals performed as part of federally related transaction must comply with standards and be performed by state licensed or certified appraisers. We as real estate agents do CMAs. We also do BPOs for the lenders. They should never be called appraisals and never considered as such. And we've got to put a disclosure on them that says that. There we go. And here's just a couple additional math problems you could do on your own later if you wanted to walk through them. We're done with this chapter. Okay. We're already past the time, so we didn't need to do those extra ones. So let's do the key terms to review, and then we can dismiss for the day here. Okay. A lot of information in that chapter. Well, there's a lot of questions coming from it too. Before we do the key terms to review, next to letter J in key terms 1, write to compare income properties. Analysis of rental income and use roughly in sales comparison approach to compare income properties or income producing properties, however you want to word it.
Yeah.
And next to where it says income approach on next to number 13 in key terms one,
Hmm.
next to number 13, right or below it, right? CAP or GRM, CAP or GRM.
Okay.
Okay. So process of estimating value.
Appraisal.
Appraisal, 2 is A. Rate of return demanded by investors in a particular area.
Cap rate.
That's the cap or capitalization rate. Correct. 4 is B.
Beast.
Similar, 4
Oh,
is B as
13.
in boy.
Okay, third, not 13. Okay, B.
Yeah, yeah. 4 is B.
Yeah, yeah.
Similar nearby property recently sold.
Compare rebels.
Yep. 5 is C, comparables. Uh, extra that contributes to the owner's satisfaction, like clean air, views, and so on.
Amenity.
Amenities. 1 is D. An independent person trained to provide an unbiased estimate of value.
Appraiser.
3 is E as in Edward. Analysis of income, including rental and other factors. And other factors. Analysis of income, including rental
GRM.
and other factors. Yeah, GIM. 10 is F because it's also other factors in coming up with money from non-real estate related stuff. Correct. 10 is F. GIM, gross income multiplier. Loss of value due to any cause. Loss of value due to any
GRM.
cause or condition.
Gross rent multiplier.
What do we call a loss of value? Due to any reason.
Depreciation. Depreciation.
Depreciation, correct. 7 is G. A loss of value due to factors beyond the property's boundaries.
Functional obsolescence.
Uh,
No. External obsolescence. Sorry.
external obsolescence. There you go. 8 is H. A loss of value due to worn or outdated features. They say outmoded. I
This
guess
is
that
functional.
means outdated. Yeah. 9 is I. Functional obsolescence. Analysis of rental income used roughly in sales comparison approach to compare
GRM.
income producing properties.
GRM.
GRM, the gross rent multiplier. 11 is J. Appraisal technique that analyzes the cost to build.
Cost approach.
Yes, 6 is K. No, that's right. 6 is K, cost approach.
Cost to build. Okay.
Analysis of value of property using return on investment.
Return on investment. This income approach, cap or GRM.
Yep, correct. 13 is L, the income approach using the CAP or GRM. Correct.
By just a second, what does it mean? Analysis of value of property? Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
fine. Correct. Okay.
Yep. How do you determine the rate of return? The cap rate, right?
Cap rate. Yeah.
Use of land that yields the most money.
Highest and best use.
12 is M. There you go. Okay. Key terms 2. What a property actually sells for.
Value.
What kind of value?
Market value.
Well, actually, that's kind of wrong. I shouldn't have said that. What a property actually sells for is the market price. It's the sale price. 1 is A. Loss of value due to wear and tear.
But price, okay, value is future, price is current. Okay.
Correct. What a property actually sells for. And remember, in a perfect world, the market price is the selling price. In a perfect world, the market value and the market price are one and the same, but they are different. They can be different.
Yeah.
So 1 is A, market price, what a property actually sells for. Now, for B, loss of value due to wear and tear.
Physical deterioration.
Correct. Physical deterioration. 3 is B. Location and the buyer's willingness to pay more for certain locations.
Situs.
Situs. 8 is C. We're going to sit us right here when we find that perfect location. So 8 is C. Analysis of values received by different appraisal approaches. What do you call it when you use more than one of
Reconciliation.
the same approach? Yeah, oh, correct. When you use,
Reconciling.
yep, when you use more than one of the three approaches to value on the same property, it's reconciliation. 4 is D. Present worth of future benefits can also be described as
Value.
value. 11 is E. A cost to rebuild using today's materials and techniques.
Rebuild. Replace. Replacement cost.
But
Reproduction is.
yeah, 5 is F. It would be the replacement costs. Because
Okay.
you're using today's materials and techniques. It's not necessarily an exact duplicate of what was there.
Reproduction.
You know, like that old beautiful church that was all marble and stuff. Now it could be made out of, I don't know, the whole thing could be
That's
plywood, you know, and
that's
siding.
reproduction. That's
Uh,
reproduction.
that would be reproduction if it was exactly the same with using the same materials like marbles and stuff like that, all, you know, all fancied up. Correct. So,
G.
yeah, we're okay. Price that would be paid by an informed buyer.
Market value.
Market value. How does that make them an informed buyer? 2 is G, market value. But how does that make them an informed buyer? Well, because they're educated by our comparative market analysis that we've provided for them, right? An appraisal technique that analyzes the sales price of comparable properties.
Sales comparison approach.
7 is H, correct. Cost to rebuild exactly using materials like the original.
Reproduction.
Reproduction. 6 is I. Another way I tell people it's easy to remember, I do it in a joking way. I don't mean to be offensive to anybody at all, but I do it in a joking way to try to remember this. Why do women have children? To make little miniature copies of themselves, right? To
Mhm.
reproduce, to reproduce, right? That's called reproduction when you have
Yeah.
children. So reproduction, you're making little miniature copies of yourself. You know,
Good
you don't
example.
to have a child, you don't need to have an exact miniature copy. Look, not everybody could have children. You could adopt. So it serves the same purpose. You have a child, but it's not necessarily an exact duplicate of yourself. it's a it's a joke. Nobody get
Yeah.
offended by it. Yeah. Good.
Nothing to be offended. It's perfect
Okay.
example.
Okay. So 6 is I, reproduction cost. Principle that no one pays more if the same can be had for less.
Substitution.
Yes, substitution. 10 is J. And a parcel of real estate that's being appraised is referred to as
Subject property.
the subject property. 9 is K. That is correct. And that concludes chapter 16, which was a long one.